Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto was made the breeding master of a revived Uzumaki clan? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. An Echo of Whirlpools. The wind atop the Hokage monument had always been a liar. It whispered of freedom, of a world without walls, a deceptive comfort to the four stone faces that stared with unblinking permane. NCE over the village they had sworn to protect. A year had passed since the war, a year of frantic, desperate rebuilding that had washed the scent of blood and ash from the air, replacing it with the fragrance of fresh cut lumber and wet plaster. From his perch on the fourth Hokage's head, Naruto Uzumaki could see it all. The new academy, wider and taller than the old one, the bustling marketplace. Its stalls overflowing with goods from lands that had, until recently, been enemies, the laughter of children that echoed in the streets, a sound more precious than any jutsu. This was the peace he had fought for, bled for, and nearly died for, so why did it feel so fragile? A flicker of movement in his periphery, and a swirl of leaves resolved into the form of an Anbu, their porcelain cat mask hiding all expression. Uzumaki-sama. The voice was flat, filtered through the mask. The Hokage requires your presence in the council chambers. The fire daimyo has arrived. Naruto didn't turn, he just nodded, his eyes still tracing the path of a kite dancing in the sky. Tell them I'm on my way. The Anbu vanished as silently as they had appeared. Naruto pushed himself to his feet, the worn fabric of his pants dusting off stone. The sama still felt foreign, a formal suit that didn't quite fit. He was a hero, they said, the savior of the world. But in the quiet moments, when the cheering faded, he was just Naruto. And Naruto was tired, not the bone-deep exhaustion of a battle, but a weariness of the soul that had settled in after the adrenaline of war had finally faded. He had achieved his dream. The world was safe, his friends were alive, Sasuke was back, in his own way. And yet, an unfamiliar restlessness churned within him. He took a final look at the sprawling village below, a vibrant tapestry of life he had sworn to protect, before leaping from the monument. He landed softly on a rooftop, his movements fluid and silent, a stark contrast to the boisterous, clumsy child he had once been. The journey to the Hokage Tower was a short one, a blur of tiled roofs and bustling streets. He ignored the pointing fingers and excited whispers. He was used to them now, the reverence that had replaced the glares of his youth. It was better, he knew, but sometimes it felt just as lonely. The council chambers were silent and heavy with unspoken importance. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and expensive incense. Kakashi sat behind the Hokage's desk, his single visible eye looking more weary than usual. To his right sat the fire daimyo, a man whose soft, plump hands held more power than 1,000 shinobi. Flanking them, perched like ancient vultures, were Homura and Kaharu, the two elders whose faces seemed permanently etched with disapproval. Shikamaru stood in the corner near the window, his arms crossed, his expression carefully neutral, but Naruto could see the tension in his friend's shoulders. This wasn't a casual meeting. Naruto, Kakashi began, his voice a low rumble. Thank you for coming. Naruto gave a short nod, his gaze sweeping over the assembled figures. You summoned me. What's this about? The fire daimyo smiled, a placid, political expression that didn't reach his eyes. Naruto-kun, a hero of your stature deserves more than our mere gratitude. We have come to offer you a future. Not just for you, but for your lineage. He gestured to the low table in the center of the room. On it lay 3 large, ornate scrolls, bound in crimson silk and sealed with a wax stamp bearing the spiraling crest of the Uzumaki clan. A crest Naruto had only ever worn on his back, a symbol of a family he had never known. A year of peace has given us time for reflection, Kaharu said, her voice dry as autumn leaves. The fourth great ninja war showed us how vulnerable we are. It was the power of a single clan, the Uchiha, that nearly brought us to ruin. And it was the power of another, the Uzumaki, that was instrumental in our salvation. Homura picked up the thread seamlessly. The Uzumaki clan of Uzushiogakure was our most powerful ally. Their fuinjutsu was legendary, their vitality, unmatched. Their destruction was a blow from which this village has never fully recovered. We believe it is time to rectify that. Naruto's eyes narrowed. He stepped forward, his gaze fixed on the scrolls. What are you saying? The daimyo spread his hands benevolently. We are proposing the re-establishment of the Uzumaki clan. We have secured the rights to the land of whirlpools. We will fund the construction of a new village, a new Uzushio. It will be an autonomous shinobi village, allied with Konoha, but under your command. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. We are naming you the first clan head and daimyo of the land of whirlpools. The room was silent. Naruto stared at the scrolls, his mind racing. A village, his own village, a home for the Uzumaki. It was a staggering thought, a dream he had never even dared to entertain. A place where the red hair and fierce life force of his lineage could flourish once more. Then, Kakashi slid a fourth, slimmer scroll across the table. It was unbound, a simple ledger. This is a list, Naruto, the Hokage said, his voice gentle but firm. Compiled by our intelligence division. Individuals across the elemental nations with confirmed Uzumaki ancestry. Some are aware of their heritage, others are not. They are scattered, hidden. Survivors. Naruto picked up the list. Names. Dozens of them. From the land of hot water, the land of grass, even a few within the land of iron. Fam. Ily tree with its roots shattered and its branches flung to the far corners of the world. Your first duty as clan head, the daimyo continued, his tone shifting from benevolent to businesslike, will be to gather your people. Your second, will be to secure the future of the bloodline. He looked at Naruto, his gaze pointed. The Uzumaki vitality is a strategic asset. Their natural affinity for Ealing Jutsu is a military advantage we can no longer afford to be without. We expect you to take multiple wives, produce strong heirs, and restore your clan's numbers as quickly and efficiently as possible. There are several suitable candidates within Konoha and other allied nations we can propose. The air in Naruto's lungs turned to ice. The dream shattered, replaced by a cold, ugly reality. Strategic asset, military advantage, suitable candidates. The words echoed in his head, stripping the warmth from the idea and leaving behind a hollow, metallic shell. They weren't offering him a family. They were giving him a breeding assignment. His hands clenched, the scroll of names crinkling in his grip. He could feel Kurama stir within him, a low growl of shared indignation. He looked at the faces around him. The daimyo's placid smile, the elders' stern, expectant gazes. Even Kakashi, his teacher, looked at him with the calculating eye of a Hokage, weighing the needs of the village above all else. Only Shikamaru met his gaze with a flicker of understanding, a silent apology for the political machine they were all caught in. I see, Naruto said, his voice dangerously quiet. He placed the crumpled scroll back on the table, smoothing it out with a hand that trembled slightly. You need the Uzumaki clan's power back on the board. It is for the good of the world, Naruto-kun, the daimyo said smoothly. A strong Uzumaki clan means a stable world. And a strong Konoha, Naruto added, the edge in his voice sharp enough to cut glass. He didn't wait for a reply. He turned on his heel and walked out of the room. The heavy doors closing behind him with a soft thud that sounded like the lid of a coffin. He walked through the village, a ghost in his own triumph. The cheerful greetings of villagers. The adoring calls of children, they all felt distant, like sounds heard from underwater. He saw a young couple holding hands by the fountain, their laughter genuine and free. He saw Iruka-sensei scolding a group of academy students, his frustration barely masking his deep affection for them. He saw families, everywhere. Bonds forged not by bloodline mandates or strategic necessity, but by choice. By love. They wanted him to be a king, but they were asking him to be a stud horse. They were handing him a crown and a leash in the same breath. The loneliness he had felt his entire childhood, the gaping void of a family he never had, threatened to swallow him whole. He had always dreamed of a family, a loud, chaotic, loving one. Now they were offering him one on a platter, but it felt like a perversion of everything he held dear. A clan built on duty, not devotion. Children born of obligation, not affection. It was a gilded cage, and the thought of it made his skin crawl. His feet, moving on their own, carried him to training ground 3. The 3 wooden posts stood as they always had, scarred and weathered by 1,000 mock battles. This was where it had all begun. Team 7, Kakashi, Sakura, Sasuke, and him. A broken, lonely boy who had found his first real family right here. He ran a hand over the rough wood of the middle post, the one he had been tied to for failing the bell test. It felt like a lifetime ago. Back then, all he wanted was acknowledgement. Now, he had the acknowledgement of the entire world, and it felt like a chain around his neck. He sat on the grass, leaning against the post, and stared up at the clouds, just as Shikamaru had taught him. He tried to empty his mind, to find a path through the suffocating weight of expectation. But all he could see were the faces of the council, their eyes filled with political calculus. All he could hear were the daimyo's words, secure the future of the bloodline. He didn't know how long he sat there, lost in the storm of his own thoughts. The sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, a fiery reminder of his own heritage. The air grew cooler. He should go home. But the small, tidy apartment he lived in had never truly felt like home. It was just a place to sleep. A new scent drifted on the breeze, cutting through his turmoil. The rich, savory aroma of pork broth and roasted seaweed. Ichiraku ramen. Of course, some instincts never died. He found himself walking toward the familiar stall, a beacon of warmth in the deepening twilight. The flap was pulled back, and the light from within spilled out onto the street. Chuki was behind the counter, his movements as practiced and comforting as a lullaby. Ayame was taking an order from a couple of chunin, her smile as bright as ever. Seeing them, a small knot of tension in Naruto's chest loosened. Naruto, welcome, Chuki boomed, his grin crinkling the corners of his eyes. The usual, one miso charshu, extra pork. Naruto managed a weak smile and slid onto a stool. Yeah, old man, make it two. He was halfway through his first bowl, the familiar taste a balm on his frayed nerves, when a soft voice spoke his name. Naruto-kun. He turned. Hinata Hyuga stood there, a small grocery basket in her hand. She wore a simple lavender kimono, and her dark hair shone under the lantern light. Her expression was one of gentle concern. Hinata, he said, surprised. What are you doing here? I was on my way home, she explained, her gaze flickering down to his half-empty bowl. I heard about the meeting with the daimyo. The whole village is talking. Naruto grunted, pushing a slice of pork around with his chopsticks. Yeah, well, good news travels fast. She hesitated for a moment, then placed her basket on the ground and gracefully took the stool next to him. Her presence was a quiet counterpoint to the storm raging inside him. She didn't press, didn't demand answers. She just sat with him, a silent offering of support. Chuki-san, she said softly. Could I have a bowl of plain ramen, please? They ate in silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the soft clinking of their chopsticks and the sizzle of the grill. It wasn't an awkward silence. It was a comfortable one, a shared space that didn't need to be filled with words. Finally, Naruto put his chopsticks down, the second bowl still untouched. They want to make me a king, Hinata, he said, his voice low. And they want me to fill a kingdom with my children. Hinata stopped eating, her full attention on him. Her pale eyes air filled with an empathy so profound it almost made him flinch. They gave me lists, he continued, the bitterness rising in his throat. A list of my scattered clan members. A list of potential wives. It was all about strategy and bloodlines. About making the Uzumaki strong again so they can be a good guard dog for Konoha. He let out a harsh, humorless laugh. For my whole life, I wanted a family. Now they're trying to hand me one. And it feels dirty. Like they're trying to put me in a cage and call it a throne. He finally looked at her, his own turmoil reflected in her gentle gaze. How can I build a family on that? On duty, on command. I don't want my kids to be born because of a political decree. I don't want my wife to be with me because the council approved her. He clenched his fist on the counter. My mother and father, they chose each other. They fought for each other. What they had, that was real. This is just a transaction. Hinata listened patiently, her expression never changing. When he finished, the silence stretched again, but this time it was different. It was expectant. When I was a child, she began, her voice barely above a whisper, but it cut through his anger like a soft breeze. Everyone in my clan, my own father, told me I was a failure. That I was too weak, too gentle, to be the heiress of the Hyuga. They saw me as a flawed tool, one that wasn't suited for its purpose. She looked down at her hands, folded in her lap. But you never saw me that way. During the Chunin exams, when I was terrified of facing Neji Nisan, you didn't see a failure. You saw someone who was trying her best. You yelled at me to not give up. You believed in me when no one else did, not even myself. Her gaze lifted, meeting his. During Payne's assault, when you were pinned down and I ran to help you, I wasn't thinking about the Hyuga clan's duty. I wasn't thinking about Konoha's strategic assets. I was thinking about you. Because you had shown me my own worth. You made me feel like I belonged. She leaned forward slightly, her sincerity a palpable force. The council, the daimyo, they see the Uzumaki clan as a collection of powers and a bloodline. They are thinking like politicians. But you don't see people that way. You never have. Her words were a balm, soothing the raw, angry parts of his soul. They can give you land and titles, Naruto-kun, she said. Her voice gaining a quiet strength. But they cannot dictate the kind of home you build on it. They think they are asking you to be a breeding master, but what they are really giving you is a chance to do for your clan what you did for me, and for so many others. A chance to give them a place where they feel they belong. A family built not on orders from a council, but on the strength of your heart. Her faith in him was absolute, untainted by politics or ambition. She wasn't looking at the hero of the Leaf, or the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails, or the future clan head. She was looking at Naruto Uzumaki, the boy who had shown a shy, forgotten girl that she had the strength to stand up for herself. And in her eyes, he saw the path forward. A genuine smile, the first one all day, touched Naruto's lips. The weight on his shoulders didn't vanish, but it shifted, becoming less of a burden and more of a mantle he could choose to wear. A family built on heart, he repeated softly. I like the sound of that. He picked up his second bowl of ramen. Thank you, Hinata. I really needed to hear that. Her cheeks flushed with a delicate pink, but her smile was serene. You have always known the way, Naruto-kun. Sometimes you just need to be reminded to look in the right place. The next morning, Naruto stood before Kakashi in the Hokage's office. The elders and the daimyo were not present. It was just the two of them, teacher and student. So, Kakashi said, leaning back in his chair. Have you made a decision? I have, Naruto said, his voice clear and firm. There was no trace of the previous day's turmoil. I accept the position as head of the Uzumaki clan. I will build new Uzushio, and I will gather my people. Kakashi's visible eye curved into a smile. I'm glad to hear it. The daimyo will be, but I'm doing it my way, Naruto cut in, his gaze unwavering. There will be no arranged marriages. There will be no breeding programs. My clan will not be a military asset for Konoha to command. We will be your allies, your friends, your family, as our ancestors were. But we will be our own people. He stepped forward, placing his hands on the Hokage's desk and leaning in. His presence filling the room with an undeniable authority. I'm not building a barracks, Kakashi-sensei. I'm building a home, a sanctuary for anyone with Uzumaki blood who has been lost, hunted, or forgotten. It will be a place of love and free will, not duty and obligation. We will choose our partners, we will raise our children in peace, and our strength will come from our bonds, not just our blood. He straightened up, his blue eyes blazing with a conviction as bright as the sun. Those are my terms. You and the council can either accept them, or you can find someone else to be your king. Kakashi looked at him for a long moment, the smile fading from his eye to be replaced by a look of profound respect. He saw before him not the hyperactive knucklehead he had once trained, but a leader. A man who had inherited not just his father's face, but his mother's indomitable will. I don't think, Kakashi said slowly, that anyone else would be qualified for the job. He stood and offered his hand. Welcome to the world of politics, Lord Uzumaki. Naruto shook his hand, the grip firm and sure. Just Naruto is fine, sensei. Miles away, in the desolate, biting cold of the land of frost. The world was white and silent. Snow fell in thick, heavy sheets, muffling all sound, burying the world under a blanket of pure, unforgiving white. Here, there were no politics, no burdens of leadership. There was only the hunt. Sasuke Uchiha moved through the blizzard like a phantom. His single dark eye, the Sharingan's crimson hidden for the moment, scanned the landscape. He wasn't tracking a person. He was tracking an absence. A lead from one of Orochimaru's old hideouts had spoken of a place where the very energy of the world went to die, a nexus of unnatural stillness. He found it on the slopes of a nameless mountain, a small, ancient shrine, nearly buried by snow. It was unremarkable, made of dark, weathered stone. But as he drew closer, he felt it. A profound and disturbing emptiness. It wasn't just quiet, it was void. The trees around it were petrified, their branches brittle and gray. The ground was frozen solid, but not with ice. It was as if all life, all chakra, all warmth had been systematically and completely leached from the area. He pushed open the heavy stone door, which crumbled to dust at his touch. The interior was bare. A single stone altar stood in the center of the small, circular room. There were no signs of a struggle, no bodies, no blood. Just that same unnatural, draining silence. It felt like the entire place was holding its breath. His eyes swept the room, taking in every detail, and then he saw it. Carved into the face of the altar was a symbol he had never seen before. It was not from any language or clan he knew. It was a complex, star-like sigil, etched with impossible precision. It seemed to pulse with a faint, cold light that his eyes could barely register. Drawn by an instinct he couldn't explain, Sasuke reached out a gloved hand and traced the strange marking. The moment his fingers touched the stone, a wave of cold, alien thought brushed against his mind. It wasn't a voice or a language, but a feeling, an impression. It was ancient, vast, and utterly indifferent. It felt of distant stars and the silent, patient hunger of the void. It was the sense of a farmer looking down upon his field, waiting for the harvest. Sasuke snatched his hand back as if burned, his Sharingan flaring to life, the tomo spinning wildly. The impression vanished, leaving only the oppressive silence of the shrine. He stared at the sigil, his heart pounding with a sudden, unfamiliar dread. He had faced down madmen, monsters, and even a self-proclaimed goddess. But this was different. This was not a threat born of hatred or ambition. This was something older, colder, and its gaze was turning towards their world. He didn't know what the symbol meant, or who had left it here. But as he turned and walked back out into the endless, swirling snow, Sasuke Uchiha knew one thing with absolute certainty. A storm was coming, one that would make the Fourth Great Ninja War look like a summer shower. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The First Sprout. The sea air tasted of salt and memory. Standing at the prow of the ship, Naruto watched the hazy silhouette on the horizon resolve into a jagged green coastline. The land of whirlpools, his ancestral home. From the scrolls he'd devoured in the weeks since the meeting, he knew the island was ringed by treacherous, eternally churning whirlpools, a natural defense that had made Uzumaki the most secure of all the hidden villages. It was also what had trapped his ancestors when their enemies finally came. The Konoha-flagged vessel, captained by a seasoned shinobi from the logistics corps, didn't dare challenge the maelstroms. Instead, it navigated to a calmer, hidden cove on the island's southern lee, a route painstakingly mapped from old naval charts found deep in Konoha's archives. As they drew closer, the sheer scale of the ruins became apparent. Skeletons of great towers clawed at the sky, their stone flanks scarred with the black residue of ancient fire and forbidden jutsu. Collapsed walls, some half a mile long, snaked through the overgrown landscape, buried under a century of vines and roots. It wasn't a dead place. It was haunted. Naruto could almost hear the echoes of battle. The cries of his kinsmen, a faint, sorrowful song carried on the wind. He leapt from the ship before the ramp was even lowered, landing silently on the white sand. He was not alone. A small, efficient camp had already been established. Tents stood in neat rows, a perimeter of security tags shimmered faintly between the trees, and the rhythmic sound of hammer on wood echoed from a clearing. At the center of it all was Captain Yamato, directing a team of Konoha engineers. Hokage's wood style is certainly handy for construction, Naruto commented, walking up beside his former captain. Yamato turned, a bead of sweat on his brow. He wasn't using his wood style for the main structures, that would be a massive drain on his chakra, but for creating scaffolding, reinforcing weak ground, and clearing pathways through the dense, unnaturally resilient foliage. Naruto, welcome. We've secured the beachhead and established a stable water source. The core of the island, however, the chakra residue is chaotic. It's like the land itself is screaming. Naruto nodded, his senses already picking it up. It was a faint, discordant hum in the air, a residue of countless powerful sealing jutsu unraveling at once. It was the chakra of a dying village. It's a wound, Naruto said quietly. It'll heal, now that its people are coming home. His proclamation hung in the air, full of a hope that felt audacious in the face of such desolation. In truth, he didn't know if anyone would come. He had sent out the call 2 days ago. Not through official messengers, which would feel like a summons, but in his own way. He'd meditated for hours, extending his chakra signature, shaping it into a beacon of warmth and welcome, pulsing it outwards with a specific frequency he hoped would resonate with the unique life force of his lineage. It was a shot in the dark, a prayer cast into the wind. For 3 days, the only sounds were the construction, the crash of waves, and the sigh of the wind through the ruins. Naruto spent the time exploring, walking the ghost streets of his ancestors. He found collapsed dojos, crumbling libraries filled with scrolls turned to dust, and vast, empty plazas, as where a proud people had once gathered. In the center of the largest plaza, a great stone monument lay in pieces, but he could still make out the Uzumaki swirl carved into its heart. He felt a profound connection to this place, a sense of belonging that was as heavy with sorrow as it was with pride. On the 4th day, she arrived. The perimeter alarms didn't sound. The sensory ninja posted in the trees reported nothing. One moment the beach was empty, the next she was there, standing just beyond the camp's edge, her crimson hair a defiant slash of color against the muted greens and grays of the island. She wore practical traveling clothes, and a pair of dark, rectangular glasses were perched on her nose. Karen Uzumaki. Naruto felt her sharp, probing chakra signature a second before he saw her. He walked out to meet her, a genuine smile on his face. Karen, I was hoping you'd come. Her expression was a carefully constructed mask of neutrality, but her chakra signature was a whirlwind of suspicion, curiosity, and a deep, buried flicker of hope. Don't look so happy, she snapped, her voice sharp. I'm not here to sign up for your fan club. Orochimaru is dead, his hideouts are mostly cleaned out, and I was bored. I felt your obnoxious chakra signal and figured I'd see what kind of mess you've gotten yourself into this time. It's not a mess, Naruto said, his smile not wavering. It's a home. Or it will be, Karen scoffed, pushing her glasses up her nose. Her gaze swept over the camp, the Konoha engineers, the Anbu guards subtly positioned in the trees. A home, looks or like a Konoha military outpost to me. What's the deal, Naruto? The great war hero gets a promotion and a fancy new title. Are you their warden now? In charge of rounding up all the stray Uzumaki so Konoha can keep us on a leash? Her words were laced with a cynicism born from a lifetime of being hunted and used for her abilities. Naruto didn't rise to the bait. He knew her anger wasn't truly directed at him. There's no leash, Karen, he said calmly. He gestured towards the vast, silent ruins behind them. This is ours. Konoha is helping us rebuild. That's it. No one is being rounded up. I sent out an invitation. It's up to each person to decide if they want to accept. She narrowed her eyes, studying him. And what about you? The daimyo made you clan head. What do they want in return? 10 kids from you by the end of the year. A new army of Jinchuriki. His smile finally faltered. She had cut straight to the heart of his own fears. They tried, he admitted, his voice dropping. Their proposal was cold. All about strategic assets and bloodline purity. He met her gaze, his own blue eyes deadly serious. I told them to shove it. Karen's cynical facade cracked, just for a second. A flicker of genuine surprise crossed her face. This place, Naruto continued, turning to look at the ruins, won't be built on duty or obligation. It's going to be a sanctuary. A place where kids with red hair don't have to hide it. A place where our abilities are a gift, not a curse that someone wants to exploit. A place where we can choose who we love and build our own families, however we see fit. He looked back at her. That's the deal, my deal. Take it or leave it. He didn't try to persuade her further. He just stood there, his vision laid bare, honest and unflinching. Karen stared at him for a long, silent moment. She could feel his chakra, a vast, sun-warm ocean of power, but beneath it, there was no deception. Not a single ripple of falsehood. It was just Naruto. Honest to a fault, idealistic to the point of foolishness, but utterly, unshakably sincere. A slow, wry smile touched her lips. You always did have a stupidly optimistic streak. She walked past him, heading towards the camp. Fine, I'll stick around. For now, somebody has to make sure you don't build the houses upside down. Over her shoulder, she added, and for the record, my sensory abilities are the best there is. If we're going to find our scattered cousins, you're going to need me. Naruto grinned. I was counting on it. Karen's arrival was a turning point. Her presence, another Uzumaki standing beside him, made the entire endeavor feel more real. And she was as good as her word. She was a whirlwind of efficiency, using her Kagura mind's eye to map the island's chaotic chakra flows, identifying the most stable areas for construction and pinpointing the locations of ancient seals that were dangerously close to failing. She became his chief of intelligence, his sensory operator, and his most trusted, if perpetually sarcastic, advisor. A week later, she found their first lead. Got something, she announced, walking into the command tent where Naruto and Yamato were poring over blueprints for the main residential district. She tapped a map of the elemental nations, her finger landing on the mountainous terrain of the land of hot water. It's faint and old, not a single person, but a small cluster. Maybe a dozen, 2 dozen individuals. Their chakra signature is thin, diluted over generations, but it's there. The Uzumaki spark. Her expression turned serious. They're hiding, not just living quietly. They've suppressed their chakra to an almost civilian level. They're deep in the mountains, far from any of the shinobi villages or major towns. They don't want to be found. Naruto looked at the map. A flicker of excitement warred with a sense of caution. They have a right to their peace, he said. We can't just storm in there. They also have a right to know they have a home waiting for them. Karen countered. A place where they don't have to hide. Look, Naruto, my family was wiped out in the land of grass because they were Uzumaki. These people are hiding for a reason. They've probably been persecuted for generations. You, the most famous Uzumaki in the world, showing up on their doorstep might give them a heart attack. So what do you suggest? Yamato asked. A small team, Karen said. No Konoha uniforms. Just us. We go quietly. We talk. No shows of force. You, she jabbed a finger at Naruto, will have to turn down that ridiculous sun-bright chakra of yours so we don't announce our arrival from 3 countries away. Naruto nodded. Just the 2 of us, then. A diplomatic mission. Hardly. Karen scoffed. More like a family reunion. And those are always awkward. The journey to the land of hot water took 2 days. They traveled light and fast, moving through the lush, steam-filled forests that gave the country its name. True to her word, Karen guided them with pinpoint accuracy, navigating them through treacherous ravines and hidden paths, homing in on the faint chakra signatures. Naruto, meanwhile, focused on suppressing his own presence. A difficult task that required constant concentration. It was like trying to hide a bonfire under a blanket. They found the village nestled in a hidden caldera, a small, self-sufficient community that looked like it hadn't changed in 100 years. The houses were made of dark wood and stone, built into the mountainside. The people were simple farmers and blacksmiths. Many of them had dark red or auburn hair, and their faces, though etched with a deep-seated weariness, held the distinct features of his clan. Their arrival was met with instant hostility. The moment they stepped into the village clearing, they were surrounded. Men and women armed with farm sickles, hunting spears, and a few rust-pitted swords formed a tight circle around them. Their eyes were filled with fear and suspicion. An old man, his back bent with age but his eyes sharp and clear, stepped forward. He had the deepest red hair Naruto had ever seen, faded to the color of rust, and a long, braided beard. State your purpose, the elder commanded. His voice a low growl. We have no business with shinobi. Naruto held up his hands in a gesture of peace, keeping his chakra completely placid. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. This is Karen Uzumaki. We haven't come here as shinobi. We've come as family. The name, Uzumaki, sent a ripple of shock through the crowd. Whispers erupted. The elder's eyes widened, then narrowed into slits of disbelief. Lies. He spat. The Uzumaki were wiped out. We are all that is left. We survived by forgetting that name, by hiding what we are. You are spies from Yugakure, or worse. Bounty hunters who've sniffed out our bloodline. We're not, Naruto said, his voice calm and steady. Look, he reached up and brushed his bangs aside, revealing the faint, whisker-like marks on his cheeks. He channeled a tiny, controlled thread of Kurama's chakra, just enough for the marks to darken. It was a feature unique to him, a mark of his burden and his bond. Then he looked at Karen. Karen sighed, seeing her cue. With a flicker of her hands, she wove a simple, almost forgotten Uzumaki hand seal. A faint, golden chain, no thicker than a thread, materialized from the back of her hand, pulsed with light once, and vanished. It wasn't a combat technique. It was a simple cantrip, a way of identifying oneself, a piece of their shared heritage that no outsider could replicate. The villagers gasped. The elder stared, his eyes wide with shock and a dawning, fearful recognition. He had seen that seal before, in the faded drawings of a scroll passed down from his grandfather. How? The old man whispered. My name is Kosuke, the elder said later, once the initial hostility had subsided. They sat around a low fire in his home, the air thick with the scent of pine smoke and herbal tea. We are the last of the Ashina branch of the Uzumaki. When the homeland fell, our ancestors fled. They learned quickly that our name was a curse. We were hunted for our abilities, for the bounty on our heads. So we hid. We forgot our jutsu. We forgot our name. We became simple mountain folk. It was the only way to survive. Naruto listened, his heart aching for them. He saw his own lonely child, hood mirrored in their story of persecution. You don't have to hide anymore, he said softly. I'm rebuilding Uzushio, our home. I've come to ask you to join us. Kosuke looked at him, his ancient EYs filled with a century of ingrained fear. A new village, protected by whom? The very shinobi who stood by and watched as our first home burned. You are the boy with the 9 tails, aren't you? The hero of the war. Your fame makes you a target. To join you would be to paint that target on our own backs. To stay here is to live in fear, Karen interjected, her tone blunt. You're like mice, hoping the hawk doesn't see you. Is that living, or is it just not dying? The old man flinched at her harsh words, but he didn't refute them. Naruto placed a hand on his own chest. I know what it's like to be hunted, he said, his voice resonating with an honesty that was impossible to fake. To be feared and hated for something you were born with. For years, all I wanted was a place to belong. A family. I'm not offering you a fortress or an army. I'm offering you a home. A place where our children can grow up proud of their red hair, where they don't have to suppress their own life force just to stay safe. I can't promise you a life without risk. But I can promise you, on my parents' memory, that you will never have to stand alone again. He didn't make grand speeches about power or glory. He spoke of children, of pride, of belonging. He connected with them not as a cage-level hero, but as a fellow outcast who understood their pain on a fundamental level. Kosuke was silent for a long time, staring into the flickering flames of the fire. The other villagers gathered in the hut waited, their expressions a mixture of hope and terror. Finally, the old man let out a long, weary sigh. I am old, he said. My fear is a deep root. But my grandchildren, they deserve more than a life spent hiding in the shadows. He looked at Naruto, a flicker of something new in his eyes, not just belief, but a transfer of responsibility. We will come. A wave of relief washed over Naruto, so profound it almost made him dizzy. It was his first true victory as a clan head. Not a battle won with a Rasengan, but a family brought together with words of understanding. Later that night, as the village celebrated with a quiet, hopeful feast, Kosuke pulled Naruto aside. The old man's face was troubled, his earlier relief replaced by a familiar shadow of fear. There is something else, Lord Uzumaki, he said, his voice low and trembling. Just Naruto, he corrected gently. Kosuke nodded. Naruto-sama, forgive my earlier harshness. My fear, it is fed by more than just old stories. For months now, I have been plagued by nightmares. He wrung his gnarled hands. I see a man. He is not of this world. He is pale, like polished bone. With horns like a demon. He floats in a sea of stars, and he whispers to me. Naruto's blood ran cold. He thought instantly of Sasuke's report, of the strange sigil and the feeling of a cold alien presence. What does he whisper? Naruto asked, his voice tight. He tells me that our blood is not our own, Kosuke said, his eyes wide with a remembered terror. He calls it a divine fragment, a gift from the gods that we have squandered by mixing it with the mud of this world. He says that our suffering is a symptom of this impurity. He whispers that a shepherd is coming soon, to cleanse the flock and reclaim the gift for its rightful owners. The old man shuddered. His voice, it feels like it's coming from inside my own soul. It tells me that your new village, your plan to gather us all in one place, is a foolish mistake. That you are merely gathering the harvest for him. The festive sounds of the village faded into a dull roar in Naruto's ears. His wasn't just a political game with Konoha, or the challenge of rebuilding a nation. There was something else moving in the shadows, a threat far greater than any he had ever faced. A shepherd coming for his flock. And he had just rung the dinner bell. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. A seat at the table. The new wood of the rising watchtower was warm under Naruto's palm. Below him, the fledgling village of New Uzushio was a hive of controlled chaos. The Konoha engineers, guided by Yamato, moved with practiced efficiency, their hammers creating a steady, rhythmic heartbeat for the growing town. The Ashina clan, the families he and Karen had brought back from the land of hot water, worked alongside them. Their initial fear had slowly given way to a tentative, calloused hand hope. Their children, for the first time in their lives, ran and laughed in the open, their red and auburn hair catching the sun like scattered embers, no longer a mark of shame to be hidden. Karen stood beside him on the scaffolding, her arms crossed, her sharp eyes missing nothing. The main residential block is framed, she reported, not looking at him. Kosuke Oji's people are natural blacksmiths. They've already improved the quality of our tools. And the eastern harbor wall is almost complete. At this rate, we'll have a fully defensible town center before the first winter snow. It's not a town, Naruto said, a smile touching his lips. It's a village. Whatever, she muttered, though a hint of pride softened the edge in her voice. Point is, it's working. It was. The wound of the island was beginning to heal. The chaotic chakra that had saturated the ruins was stabilizing, soothed by the presence of its people. The air felt cleaner, the oppressive weight of history lifting, ever so slightly, with each new beam that was raised. The peace was shattered by the cry of a messenger hawk. It spiraled down from the sky, a black speck against the brilliant blue, landing perfectly on the gloved arm of an Anbu stationed on the beach. A moment later, the masked shinobi appeared beside them on the scaffolding in a silent swirl of leaves, holding out a formal scroll sealed with the Hokage's insignia. Naruto took it. The weight of it was familiar, and his brief sense of contentment evaporated. Trouble? Karen asked. The best kind, Naruto said, breaking the seal. His eyes scanned the neat, precise script. It's a summons. The other 4 Kage have requested an emergency summit. In the land of iron. He rolled the scroll shut. They want to know what we're doing here. Karen scoffed. Took them long enough to start worrying. What are you going to do? I'm going to go talk to them, Naruto said simply, as if discussing a trip to the market. He looked out at the village, his village. And I'm going to need a good advisor. The air in the temporary strategy room, a repurposed and hastily repaired ruin near the harbor, was thick with tension. Shikamaru Nara, who had arrived from Konoha that morning, paced in front of a large map of the elemental nations. It's a drag, but you have to see it from their perspective, he said, tapping the map where Iwagakure sat, uncomfortably close to the LND of whirlpools, traditional maritime territory. Kuretsuchi is the Tsuchikage now. She's pragmatic and aggressive. Her grandfather, Onoki, had a long and bloody history with shinobi who possessed Kekkei Genkai and unique jutsu. To her, the Uzumaki aren't just a resurgent clan, they're an unpredictable variable right on her doorstep. He slid his finger south. Chojuro, the Mizukage, is worried about naval power. Uzushio controlled these seas for centuries. Kurigakure has become a hub for trade since the war. He sees you as a potential economic and military rival. Darui in Kumo is fair, but he's all about balance. Shikamaru continued, his shadow stretching long in the lamplight. A new, independent shinobi village with ties to Konoha throws his calculations off. He'll want assurances. He'll want to know what your military ambitions are. Naruto listened, his hands steepled in front of him. He wasn't the boy who would have yelled about friendship and bashed his way through the problem. The war, and the weight of his new title, had taught him that some battles were fought with words, not fists. And Gaara has your back, Shikamaru said with a rare, faint smile. But soon as support will only get you so far. This is your stage, Naruto. You're not walking into that room as Konoha's Jinchuriki hero. You're walking in as the head of a new, unknown power. They'll be testing you, looking for weakness. Trying to figure out if you're a potential ally or a future threat. We're not a threat, Naruto stated, his voice calm and solid. We're a sanctuary. Then you have to make them believe that. Shikamaru countered, stopping his pacing to meet Naruto's eyes. And you have to do it without looking weak. You can't just ask for their permission. You have to command their respect. This isn't a plea, it's an announcement. You are here, and you are here to stay. What happens next is a negotiation between equals. A negotiation. The word felt strange. He was used to ultimatums. To final stands and desperate battles. The quiet, deadly chess game of politics was Shikamaru's world. But it had to be his now, too. All right, he said, a new resolve hardening his gaze. Let's prepare our opening move. The land of iron was a world of white peaks and black steel. The air was thin and cold, and the silence was broken only by the wind whistling through austere, pagoda-like fortresses. The summit was held in the great hall of the samurai, a vast, circular room presided over by the neutral General Mifune. The 5 Kage sat at a curved table, their colorful robes a stark contrast to the monochrome world outside. Naruto entered not in the flamboyant orange he was famous for, but in a simple, dark blue formal robe, the crimson Uzumaki spiral emblazoned proudly on his back. He moved with a quiet confidence that made the other Kage sit up a little straighter. This was not the loudmouthed boy they remembered. He took his seat at the table, a position equal to the others, with Shikamaru standing behind him. To his left, another delegation had just been seated. The Hyuga, their new clan head, Hanabi, was absent, attending to internal matters. In her stead, she had Sei, her most trusted advisor and diplomat, her sister, Hinata. Their eyes met across the table. She gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod, a silent message of support. Her presence was a steadying force. She was here in an official capacity, representing her own clan's interests in this new political landscape, but he knew her faith was with him. Kuretsuchi of Iwa spoke first, her voice as sharp as the stone of her homeland. Let's skip the pleasantries, Naruto. You've raised a village from the dead on our western flank. You're gathering individuals with a powerful and dangerous bloodline. Forgive me for not sending a housewarming gift. I want to know what your intentions are. My intentions are to give my people a home, Naruto replied, his voice even and calm, echoing in the cavernous hall. A place where they can live without fear of being hunted for the blood in their veins. A noble sentiment, Darui, the Rakage, drawled, his tone relaxed but his eyes keen. But history show, that powerful clans tend to develop powerful ambitions. Uzushio was a military fortress. Are you rebuilding it? Naruto leaned forward, his gaze sweeping over each of the Kage. I am building a village of artisans, scholars, and families. Our primary focus will be the rediscovery and mastery of Fuinjutsu. Not for conquest, but for protection. And for progress. He addressed Chojuro directly. Mizukage Dono, I have no intention of challenging your trade routes. In fact, I propose an alliance. New Uzushio will need resources Konoha cannot provide. Timber, metals, exotic foods. In return for fair trade, we can offer something unique. Uzumaki preservation seals. Imagine your perishable goods lasting months, even years, on long voyages. Imagine your ships reinforced with seals that can repel water pressure at impossible depths. Chojiro's eyes widened slightly. The economic implications were staggering. He then turned to Kuretsuchi. Tsuchikage Dono, you fear our military might. I understand the history between our lands. So I will make you this offer. I will sign a binding non-aggression pact with Iwagakure. Furthermore, I will share the foundational principles of medical sealing jutsu with your medical corps. To help heal the lingering wounds from the last war. Kuretsuchi was visibly taken aback. It was a generous, almost unheard of offer. Sharing unique clan jutsu was not something done lightly. And to you, Raikage Dono, Naruto said, his gaze meeting Darui's. You speak of balance. I agree. A world with only 5 great nations is no longer the reality. But our growth does not have to be a threat. I propose a new alliance, a shinobi union of 6, dedicated not to waging war, but to preventing it. Our village will be a center for fuinjutsu research, developing seals tea. Hat can contain rampaging tailed beasts without killing their hosts, or neutralize large-scale jutsu that threaten to destroy the landscape. Our strength will be a shield for everyone, not a sword for ourselves. Finally, he looked at Gaara, who was watching with a proud smile. Suna has been our friend through the darkest of times. I offer you our eternal friendship and an open trade agreement. Whatever you need, if it is within our power, it is yours. The room was silent. Naruto had not just defended his position, he had seized control of the entire conversation. He hadn't made excuses or asked for permission. He had offered them all something of immense value, turning their fears into a proposition of mutual benefit. He had spoken not as a general, but as a statesman. Hinata watched him, her heart swelling with a quiet pride. This was the man she had always seen, the one whose true strength was not in the Rasengan or the Nine Tails, but in his boundless capacity to understand others and bring them together. General Mifune, who had remained silent throughout, stroked his chin. Your words are bold, Uzumaki Dono. You offer partnership where they expect rivalry. Because I have seen what rivalry leads to, Naruto said, his voice dropping, carrying the weight of memory. I have seen enough war to last 1,000 lifetimes. My clan was destroyed by it. I will not let its shadow fall on my new home. The negotiations continued for hours, but the tide had turned. By the time the sun set behind the ironclad mountains, a preliminary agreement was drafted. The other Kage were still cautious, but they were convinced. Naruto had won his clan their seat at the table. Later that evening, during a formal recess, Naruto found himself in a quiet, snow-dusted garden within the samurai fortress. The air was crisp and clean. He watched his breath mist in front of him, the tension of the day slowly draining away. You were brilliant, Naruto-kun. He turned. Hinata stood a few feet away. A dark cloak wrapped around her shoulders. I just told them the truth, he said with a shrug. Shikamaru did all the hard work, figuring out what they were all afraid of. You did more than that, she insisted, stepping closer. The snow crunched softly under her feet. You showed them your vision. Not with threats or power, but with understanding. You offered to heal their fears, not just dismiss them. That is the mark of a true Kage. He felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the Nine Tails. Thanks, Hinata. It means a lot, hearing that from you. Our relationship had subtly shifted since that night at Ichiraku. The awkwardness of their youth had been replaced by a deep, comfortable understanding, a bond forged in war and strengthened in peace. They were partners, in a way that transcended titles or romance. I should get back, she said, pulling her cloak tighter. The Kiri delegation wishes to discuss the specifics of the trade agreement with the Hyuga. Of course, she turned to leave, but hesitated. Naruto-kun, she said, her back still to him. Be careful. The Mizukage's chief diplomat, a man named Yaguro, was your most vocal supporter in their internal council. He argued passionately for an alliance with New Uzushio. Not everyone in the other villages is as forward-thinking as their Kage. I'll keep that in mind, he said. Thank you. She gave a final nod and disappeared back into the fortress. The summit concluded the next day. Pacts were signed, agreements were made. Naruto had secured his people's future, not with overwhelming force, but with a display of wisdom that had earned him the grudging respect of all 4 of his peers. It was a monumental political victory. The victory felt like ash in his mouth an hour later. An alarm cry echoed through the fortress. Samurai ran through the halls, their armor clattering on the stone floors. Naruto and Shikamaru found a crowd gathered outside the Kiri delegation's quarters. Chojuro stood at the front, his face pale with shock and horror. Inside the room, a Kiri diplomat lay on the floor. He was slumped against the wall, his eyes wide open in a silent scream. There wasn't a single drop of blood, not a mark on him. But his skin was gray and sunken, stretched tight over his bones like old parchment. He was desiccated, mummified, a dried husk of a man. Naruto recognized him from the files Shikamaru had prepared. It was Yaguro, the man Hinata had just warned him about. What happened? Naruto demanded, his voice low and dangerous. A Kiri medical nin, kneeling by the body, looked up with wide, terrified eyes. I don't know, Uzumaki dono. It's like, every drop of fluid, every ounce of chakra, was just pulled out of him. Naruto's senses screamed. The air in the room was wrong. It felt empty, void, just like Sasuke's description of the shrine in the Land of Frost. A cold dread, far deeper than any political squabble, settled in his gut. A flicker of movement in the corner of the room drew his eye. A shadow detached itself from the other shadows. It was Sasuke. He must have been observing the summit from a distance. His single dark eye surveyed the scene, his expression grim. He walked over to the body, ignoring the startled cries of the samurai. He knelt, his gaze intense. Then, he looked at the wall behind the body. Naruto followed his gaze. For a fleeting second, he saw it. A faint, cold light, etching a star-like sigil onto the wood of the wall. It pulsed once, with an energy that felt ancient and utterly alien, before fading into nothing. It was the same symbol from Sasuke's report. Sasuke stood up, his face a mask of stone. He looked at Naruto, and a single, chilling word passed between them, unheard by anyone else. Ishikari. It was a name Sasuke had discovered in his dark travels, a whisper from an ancient text describing a being of the branch family of the Otsutsuki, a celestial gardener tasked with pruning, unworthy, growth from the worlds they cultivated. A shepherd. The message was brutally clear. The political victory was a sham. While they had been playing their game of nations and alliances, the true enemy had made its own move. It had eliminated Naruto's key supporter within another village, not with an army, but with an invisible, terrifying power. It was a warning. Support the Uzumaki's resurgence, and the shepherd will come to claim you. Naruto clenched his fists, the parchment of the newly signed treaties feeling fragile and meaningless in his pouch. He had just won his people a place in the world. But he had also painted a target on the back of anyone who dared to stand with them. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. Bonds of Choice, Not Chains of Blood. The return to New Uzushio was a stark contrast to the grim reality of Yaguro's death. The village was thriving, a testament to the unyielding spirit of its people. The sight of it, the sturdy new longhouses, the smoke curling from the communal forges, the laughter of children echoing in the sea-salt air, should have been a comfort. Instead, it was a heavy weight. Each cheerful face was another life he was responsible for, another potential target for the silent, chakra-draining horror that lurked in the shadows. He didn't tell them about Ishikari. Not yet. The fear that haunted Kosuke's nightmares was now a confirmed, named threat, but inciting panic would do nothing. He shared the details only with Karen, Shikamaru via a heavily coded message scroll, and Sasuke, who had vanished back into the shadows as silently as he had appeared. For now, they would be the shield. They would watch, and they would prepare. As the weeks turned into a month, more Uzumaki began to arrive. Drawn by Naruto's lingering call, by whispers on the wind of a new sanctuary, they came in ones and twos. A grizzled old fisherman from a remote island in the land of water, his lineage betrayed by his shocking red beard and impossible stamina. A young family of dyers from the land of grass, who had used their faint chakra sensitivity to create fabrics that changed color with the wearer's mood. A stern-faced woman who had been a bodyguard in a minor lord's court. Her Uzumaki blood expressing itself in a preternatural ability to heal from injury. Each arrival was a victory. The village grew, not just in numbers, but in spirit. The Ashina clan taught the newcomers the old ways, their mountain stoicism blending with the newcomers' worldly experiences. A community was forming, a vibrant tapestry woven from the scattered threads of their clan. Naruto threw himself into the work. He was no longer just a leader, he was a founder. He worked alongside the builders, hauling lumber and raising walls. He sparred with the guards, his dynamic style forcing them to adapt and improve. He sat with the elders, listening to their stories, piecing together the fractured history of their people. He felt the restlessness that had plagued him in Konoha finally begin to recede, replaced by a profound sense of purpose. His moments of peace were often found with Hinata. True to her promise, the Hyuga had established a formal consulate in the growing village, a gesture of solidarity that had not gone unnoticed by the other great nations. Hinata, as the acting ambassador, became a permanent fixture in New Uzushio. They would often walk along the newly built sea wall in the evenings, the setting sun turning the whirlpools to molten gold. They spoke of everything and nothing. The logistical challenges of grain shipments, the funny way one of the Ashina toddlers had tried to mimic her gentle fist stance, the deep-seated weariness he felt behind his cheerful facade. She was the one person he didn't have to be a leader for. With her, he wasn't Lord Uzumaki or the hero of the war. He was just Naruto. And she, in the quiet strength of his presence, was not just the Hyuga ambassador, but simply Hinata. Their bond deepened in the unspoken spaces between words, a quiet, sturdy thing growing in the heart of the bustling village. The idyllic growth, however, was not without its own internal pressures. As their numbers swelled past 100, the old ways began to surface. The Council of Elders, now composed of Kosuke and the most respected heads of the newly arrived families, approached Naruto one evening. They gathered in the newly completed main hall, a large, timber-framed building that smelled of fresh pine and sea air. Kosuke, as their spokesman, was solemn. "Naruto-sama," he began, his voice heavy with tradition. "The clan is reborn. Our people are gathered, but we are still a handful of embers in a vast, dark world. To ensure the fire is not extinguished again, we must grow. We must be strategic." He unrolled a thick, ancient scroll on the table. The parchment was yellowed with age, covered in intricate diagrams and dense, archaic script. "This is the Ketsuki no Gishiki," Kosuke explained. "The bloodline ritual. It is the sacred duty of the clan head to ensure the continuation of our lineage. The ritual guides the pairing of clan members, matching those with the strongest chakra potential to produce the most gifted offspring." Naruto stared at the scroll. It was a eugenics program, cloaked in the language of sacred duty. He saw charts of chakra compatibility, lists of desirable hereditary traits. His stomach turned. "The Elders Avenue identified the most suitable partners for you, Lord Uzumaki," another elder, a stern-faced woman named Fumi, added. "Karen Dono possesses a potent and unique bloodline trait. The woman from the Lord's court, Hana, has incredible vitality. By pairing with them, and others, you could sire a new generation of unparalleled strength within a decade." The silence in the hall was suffocating. Naruto looked at their faces, earnest, serious, utterly convinced of the righteousness of their proposal. They weren't being malicious. They were trying to protect their future, using the only tools their history had given them: pragmatism, sacrifice, and an ironclad sense of duty. They had survived for a century by being hard, by making choices that valued the survival of the group over the happiness of the individual. But he had not built this village just to survive. He had built it to live. He looked at the scroll, at the cold, clinical lines dictating the future of his people. It was the same logic the daimyo had used. A gilded cage, built by the loving hands of his own clan. He felt the old anger, the same suffocating feeling from the Hokage's office, rise within him. But this time, it was tempered with a profound sadness. "No," Naruto said, his voice quiet but carrying the unshakable weight of command. The elders blinked, stunned into silence. "I said no," he repeated, louder this time, his gaze sweeping over each of them. "Look around you. Look at what we have built. Is this a military barracks? Are we breeding soldiers? Or are we building a home?" He pushed the scroll back towards them. "Our strength isn't just in our chakra coils or our vitality. It never was. Our true strength was our tenacity, our loyalty, our love for each other. That's what the Uzumaki were famous for. Their fierce, passionate hearts." He stood up, his presence filling the room. "You want me to order people to marry? To have children based on a compatibility chart? You're asking me to do to our own." People what the world did to us for 100 years, treat them like tools. Like resources. I will not do it. But Naruto-sama, it is our tradition. Fumi protested. It is the sacred duty. Then, it is a tradition we will leave in the past, buried with the old village. Naruto's voice boomed, silencing her. We are not the old Uzumaki clan. We are the new one. And in this village, we will build families on bonds of choice. Not on chains of blood. Our children will be born from love, not from a decree. That is the law, my law. He looked at each of them, his eyes blazing. If you cannot accept that, then this is not the home for you. The ultimatum hung in the air, absolute and terrifying. He had risked everything, challenging the very foundation of their traditions. For a long moment, no one moved. The elders looked at him, then at each other, their faces a mixture of shock, anger, and a dawning, reluctant understanding. Kosuke looked down at his gnarled hands, then at the scroll, and finally, back at Naruto. He saw not a boy defying his elders, but a leader defining the soul of his nation. Slowly, the old man stood up and gave a deep, formal bow. As you command, Naruto-sama. One by one, the other elders followed suit. The rebellion was over. A new tradition had just been forged in the fire of Naruto's conviction. Word of the council meeting spread through the village like wildfire. There were murmurs of dissent, whispers from the more traditionalist factions who felt Naruto was disrespecting their heritage. But for the younger generation, for those who had arrived reeing the scars of being used and hunted, his declaration was a liberation. He had promised them a sanctuary, and he had just proven he would defend that ideal even from within his own council. That night, the village held its first official founding festival. The tension of the past few days was washed away in a celebration of their new life. Lanterns painted with the Uzumaki swirl bobbed in the breeze, casting a warm, golden glow over the central plaza. The air was filled with the sounds of music, laughter, and the sizzle of fresh-caught fish grilling over open fires. Naruto moved through the crowd, a cup of sake in his hand. Feeling the genuine warmth and respect from his people, he had passed a critical test, and his bond with them was now stronger than ever. Yet, a part of him still felt isolated. The burden of leadership a cloak he couldn't quite shrug off. He found a quiet spot on the cliffs overlooking the sea, away from the noise of the festival. The moon was full, its silver light dancing on the churning whirlpools. A leader's lonely vigil. He turned to see Hinata approaching, a small plate of festival food in her hands. She offered it to him. Just needed some air, he said, taking a grilled squid from the plate. Thanks. She stood beside him, her presence a familiar comfort. I heard what happened at the council meeting, she said softly. You did the right thing, Naruto-kun. Did I? He mused, staring out at the water. They just want to protect us. I trampled all over their traditions. Traditions that helped them survive. You gave them a reason to do more than just survive, she countered. You gave them the promise of happiness. That is a far greater gift than mere survival. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, sharing the small plate of food. The sounds of the festival a distant, happy murmur. You know, Naruto said, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. When they were talking about pairings, about building a family, there was only one person I could picture. Hinata's breath hitched, but she remained silent, her gaze fixed on the moonlit sea. Naruto turned to face her, his blue eyes clear and serious in the soft light. I'm not asking because of a decree, or because I'm a clan head who needs an heir. I'm asking because, when I'm with you, I feel like I'm finally home. More than the Hokage's office, more than my old apartment, even more than this village. You're my home, Hinata. He took a deep breath, the words he had held in his heart for so long finally breaking free. I know this is a lot to ask. To join a new clan. To tie yourself to this crazy dream of mine. But I don't want to build this future without you. I love you. Tears welled in Hinata's eyes, shimmering like pearls in the moonlight. She had waited a lifetime to hear those words. Dreamed of them in the lonely halls of the Hyuga compound. She set the plate down on a rock and gently took his hand, her touch sending a jolt of warmth through him. You once told me, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, that you admired me for my strength. But the truth is, Naruto-kun, You were always my strength. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. I love you, too. And my answer has always been yes. He stared at her, a slow, brilliant smile spreading across his face, a smile so bright it seemed to rival the moon. He wrapped his arms around her, lifting her off the ground in a joyful embrace, his laughter echoing out over the sea. In that moment, he was not a lord, not a hero, just a man who had finally, truly, found his family. Meanwhile, in the shadows of the celebrating village, a different kind of conversation was taking place. A charismatic Uzumaki scholar named Magar, who had arrived a week prior claiming to have escaped a lifetime of servitude in the land of Earth, sat with a small group of the more traditionalist elders in a quiet, secluded tea-house. His words were like honeyed poison, smooth and sweet and deadly. Lord Naruto is a great man, a powerful hero, Magar said, his voice a model of feigned respect. But his heart is too soft. He was raised in Konoha. He does not understand the sacrifices our people had to make. He does not understand the sanctity of our blood. He poured tea for the elders, his movements graceful and precise. His decree today, it was a noble sentiment. But it is a path to extinction. By welcoming those with diluted blood, by allowing them to marry freely, we are not strengthening our clan. We are dissolving it. We are blending our divine gift into the common mud. In 2 generations, the power of the Uzumaki will be nothing but a memory. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. He is a great leader for a time of peace. But a storm is coming. One that will require the full, undiluted strength of our bloodline to survive. His soft-hearted ideals are a luxury we cannot afford. He is weakening us, all in the name of love. Is that a legacy our ancestors would be proud of? Quote, one of the elders, a man who had argued fiercely for the Ketsuki no Gishiki, nodded slowly, his face grim. What you say, it has the ring of truth. Magar smiled, a cold, thin expression that did not reach his eyes. I only wish what is best for the clan. Someone must preserve the old ways. Someone must ensure that when the shepherd arrives, the flock is worthy of his attention. The name dropped into the conversation so naturally, so smoothly, that the elders barely noticed. But the seed of dissent, watered by fear and fertilized by tradition, had been planted. And in the heart of Naruto's sanctuary, a serpent was beginning to awaken. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Crimson Bastion. The season turned. The relentless summer sun softened into the golden light of autumn, and a crisp, salty wind began to blow from the north. Peace had settled over New Uzushio, a comfortable rhythm of construction, training, and community. Naruto and Hinata's engagement was a source of quiet joy for the village, a living symbol of the future he had promised them, one built on choice and affection. The main longhouse was complete, the forges glowed day and night, and the first fishing boats, their sails bearing the crimson spiral, were beginning to bring in bountiful hauls. It was a time of hopeful, mundane normalcy. Naruto stood in the main training ground, a wide, packed earth field that still smelled of freshly cut trees. In front of him stood the village's first formal guard unit, a mix of the stoic Ashina clansmen, a few of the more combat-inclined newcomers, and even some of the older Konoha engineers who had chosen to stay. They were not an army. They were 30 men and women who had sworn to protect their new home. Again, Naruto commanded, his voice sharp but encouraging. He stood in the center of a large circle drawn in the dirt. 10 of the guards stood on its perimeter. Don't just push your chakra out. Weave it together. Feel your neighbor's flow. You're not 10 separate flames, you're one single barrier. They tried again. Hands flashing through seals, they poured their energy into the circle's edge. A shimmering wall of blue chakra flickered into existence. It was messy, wavering in places, but it was there. A collaborative sealing barrier, a foundational Uzumaki technique for group defense. Better. Naruto grinned. Hana-san, you're pushing too hard. Kosuke Oji, you're not giving enough. It's a balance. A partnership. From her perch atop the watchtower that overlooked the training grounds and the sea, Karen watched them. Her sensory perception spread like a fine net over the entire island. She was the village's early warning system, its unblinking eye. A low-grade, constant perimeter seal hummed along the island's shores. A tripwire designed to alert her to any unauthorized chakra signature that crossed it. For weeks, the only alarms had been from stray sea kings or migrating flocks of chakra-sensitive birds. The attack came without warning. It was not a frontal assault. There was no fleet of ships, no declaration of war. It began with a tremor, a deep, grinding shudder that ran through the island's bedrock. Naruto stopped the training session, his head snapping up. On the tower, Karen stiffened, her eyes wide with alarm. "Naruto! Below us!" she yelled, her voice amplified by a sliver of wind-style chakra. Dozens of signatures. They're tunneling. Before the words had even finished echoing, the earth erupted. In a dozen locations across the village, in the middle of the plaza, between the new longhouses. On the edge of the training ground, massive pillars of rock burst upwards. Shinobi clad in the brown and gray of Iwagakure swarmed out, their faces set in grim, determined lines. They moved with brutal efficiency. Their first targets not the guards, but the infrastructure, the water tower, the food stores, the clinic. Chaos erupted. A civilian screamed. The idyllic peace of the morning shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. "Guardians! To me!" Naruto roared, his voice cutting through the panic. "Protect the civilians. Get them to the main hall. Now." His training paid off. The guard unit, shocked but not broken, responded instantly. They formed a defensive perimeter around the fleeing families, their newly practiced barrier jutsu flickering to life, deflecting a volley of stone shuriken. Naruto was a blur of motion. He created 24 shadow clones, each one a beacon of orange and blue, drawing the enemy's attention, engaging them, buying precious seconds. The real Naruto shot towards the largest concentration of enemies, where their leader stood on a newly formed pillar of rock, surveying the battle like a warlord. He was a mountain of a man, broad-shouldered and thick-limbed, with a long, braided black beard. His knuckles were unnaturally large, seemingly coated in a layer of granite. "So," the man boomed, his voice like grinding stones. "The great hero, Naruto Uzumaki. I am Gansaki of the Granite Fist. My clan was crushed under the heel of Konoha's alliance with your ancestors. Today, I reclaim our honor and take the secrets that should have been ours." He slammed his fists together, and the ground around Naruto buckled, jagged spikes of rock thrusting towards him. Naruto dodged, weaving through the deadly stone forest. "My clan had nothing to do with your family's history." Naruto yelled back, forming a Rasengan in his palm. "This fight is with me. Your clan is the history." Gansaki roared, meeting Naruto's charge. The battle for New Uzushio raged. It was not a one-sided fight. The Uzumaki blood, even diluted, ran hot and fierce. The Ashina blacksmiths, their hammers now weapons, fought with a stoic fury. The Dyer family hurled glass vials that shattered into clouds of thick, choking smoke and corrosive dye. From the watchtower, Karen was the nerve center of the defense. "Team 3, fall back to the eastern wall. They're trying to flank you," she yelled, her voice echoing in the minds of the guard captains via a communication seal they all wore. "Hana, 2 heavy hitters coming for the clinic's north entrance. Intercept." Hinata, flanked by the 6 Hyuga guards of her diplomatic escort, was a whirlwind of deadly grace. They moved to reinforce the main hall, where the civilians were taking shelter. Her Byakugan saw every threat, every chakra point, every weakness. Gentle fist art. 8 trigrams 64 palms. Her hands were a blur, striking an Iwa nin who had broken through the lines. The man froze, his chakra network completely severed, and collapsed in a heap. The Hyuga were a small, precise scalpel in the heart of the chaotic battle, plugging gaps in the defense with lethal efficiency. Naruto's fight with Gansaki was a brutal clash of elemental forces. Gansaki's earth style was overwhelming, turning the very ground into his weapon. He was powerful, experienced, and fueled by a generations-old hatred. Naruto was faster, more versatile, but he was being forced onto the defensive, constantly having to protect the village structures and his people from the collateral damage of Gansaki's wide-ranging attacks. He could feel the tide of the larger battle. His people were fighting bravely, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. They were taking injuries. The new sea wall had a crack in it. The dream was bleeding. He knew he couldn't win a drawn-out battle of attrition. He had to end this. All of it, now. "Karen," he yelled, channeling chakra to his voice. "I need time. 30 seconds. Keep them all off me." "Yo." You'd better be planning something spectacular, you idiot. Her voice shot back, strained with effort. Naruto landed on the roof of the main hall, the highest point in the village. He dropped into a cross-legged position, his eyes closing. He had spent weeks in the ruined libraries, painstakingly restoring fragments of ancient Fuinjutsu theory. He had found one, a forbidden technique, spoken of only in whispers. A seal that required immense chakra and perfect control, designed not to kill, but to utterly dominate a battlefield. Hinata, Karen's voice commanded, "Get to Naruto. Protect him. Whatever he's doing, it's big." Hinata didn't hesitate. She and her guards leapt to the roof, forming a circle around him, their white eyes scanning the battlefield below. "We will hold," she said, her voice a calm anchor in the storm. Gansaki saw his chance. "He's open. Kill him," he roared. A dozen Iwa nin converged on the main hall, launching themselves into the air. Hinata and her guards met them head-on. It was a desperate, swirling melee on the rooftops. A Hyuga guard went down, his leg pierced by a stone spike. Hinata herself took a glancing blow to the arm, but her relentless gentle fist attacks kept the enemy at bay. She was a wall, a bastion of quiet, deadly resolve between the enemy and the man she loved. Naruto's eyes snapped open. They were glowing, his pupils slitted like a sage. But the chakra pouring off him was not the calm energy of nature. It was the raw, primal power of the Uzumaki life force, golden and immense. He slammed his palms onto the roof beneath him. Uzumaki, Fuinjutsu, adamantine ceiling chains, heavenly prison. It did not start with an explosion. It started with a sound, a low, resonant hum that vibrated in the bones of every person on the island. And then, the ground itself erupted. Not with rock spikes or explosions, but with light. Thousands of golden chains, made of pure, solidified chakra, burst from the earth. They shot up from the plaza, from the training grounds, from the very foundations of the houses. They moved with an impossible, sentient speed, weaving through the chaos. They ignored every Uzumaki, every villager, every Hyuga. They sought only the enemy. The Iwa nin froze, their attacks forgotten. A chain wrapped around Gansaki's arm, and he roared, trying to shatter it with his granite fist. But the chain was immaterial, yet unbreakable. More chains swarmed him, wrapping around his legs, his torso, his neck, until he was completely cocooned in a cage of golden light. Across the entire village, the scene was repeated. Every single invading shinobi was ensnared. The chains coiled around them, tightening just enough to restrain them. And as they did, intricate sealing formulas, glowing with crimson light, spread across the chains, touching the shinobi's skin. Their chakra was instantly and completely suppressed. Their jutsu died on their lips. Their strength fled their bodies. In the space of 5 seconds, the entire invading force was neutralized. Bound in shining, unbreakable bonds, their fierce chakra signatures snuffed out like candles in a gale. Silence fell over the battlefield. The only sounds were the wind, the distant crash of waves, and the ragged, disbelieving gasps of the villagers. They stared at the scene. Dozens of their enemies, defeated, bound, and utterly powerless, littering their home like fallen statues. They had won. In the aftermath, a new energy filled the village. The shock wore off, replaced by a surge of communal pride. They cleaned up the damage, tended to their wounded, and there were many, though none were fatal, and secured their prisoners. They had faced their first trial by fire, and they had not broken. The battle had forged them, melting away the last of the distinctions between Ashina and newcomer. Turning them all into one people, the shinobi of New Uzushio. Naruto, drained but resolute, stood before the bound form of Gansaki. "Why?" he asked, his voice low. "Why attack us? We have no quarrel with Iwa." Gansaki, stripped of his power, spat on the ground. "My quarrel is with history. But my mission, that came from another. A benefactor." "Who?" Naruto pressed. The Iwa leader let out a harsh, bitter laugh. "He didn't give a name. He called himself a divine being. Said he found us through our hatred for you. He gave us the jutsu to bypass your whirlpools, the intelligence on your village's layout. He wanted us to test you." Gansaki looked up, a strange, fearful light in his eyes. "He said you Uzumaki were an overgrown weed in a divine garden. He wanted to See if you were strong enough to be worth harvesting. The word hung in the air, cold and menacing. Ishikari. This was his doing. A proxy war, a test. He wasn't just watching. He was probing their defenses, gauging their strength, preparing for his own arrival. As the villagers worked to clear the debris, Magar, the scholar, moved among them. His face was a perfect mask of concern, offering water to the weary guards, helping a healer bind a wound. No one noticed the faint, almost imperceptible glow in his eyes as he moved past the captured Iwa ninja. He wasn't just helping, he was analyzing. He studied the intricate seals of the heavenly prison, drinking in the data, committing every detail of Naruto's most powerful defensive jutsu to memory. Information that would be sent to his master. Later, as the sun began to set, Naruto stood on the repaired sea wall with Hinata and Karen. The captured Iwa nin were being loaded onto a reinforced ship that would take them to a high-security prison in Konoha. "You were incredible," Hinata said softly, touching the bandage on his arm where he had taken a hit protecting a child. "We all were," Naruto corrected, looking back at his people. They were bruised and battered. But they were not defeated. They were standing taller. Today, this place stopped being a project and started being a home. A fortress. A bastion, Karen added, her usual cynicism replaced by grim respect. But Gansaki's words, worth harvesting, this wasn't a random attack, Naruto. This was a prelude. Naruto nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon, where the sky was turning a deep, bloody crimson. "I know. It was a test." He clenched his fist. The victory felt hollow, the captured enemies almost irrelevant. They were just pawns. A stronger, colder enemy was playing the game. And the next one will be harder. We have to be ready. He had built them a sanctuary. Now, he had to forge it into a shield. A crimson bastion against the god who saw them as nothing more than a crop, waiting to be reaped. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. Iron and Salt. The air in New Uzushio still carried the metallic tang of shed blood, a scent that lingered long after the physical wounds had been bound and the stone debris cleared. The Iwa attack had left a scar, not just on the village, but on its psyche. A newfound vigilance had replaced the idyllic optimism of their first few months. The guards patrolled with a sharper edge, and the villagers' laughter, while still present, was now underscored by a watchful silence. They had built a home, won a battle, and in doing so, had learned the true cost of their existence. The shadow fell over Naruto in the late afternoon, as he stood on the cliffs watching the fishing boats return. One moment he was alone, the next, Sasuke Uchiha was standing beside him. His dark cloak barely stirring in the sea breeze. He bore no signs of travel, he simply was. "Sasuke," Naruto said, not turning. It was less a greeting and more an acknowledgement. The prisoners from Iwa were interrogated by Ibiki's unit. Sasuke's voice was a low murmur, devoid of preamble. Gansaki's benefactor remained nameless, but the description of his power, the ability to bestow jutsu and communicate over vast distances, is consistent with Otsutsuki methodology. Naruto finally turned, his expression grim. "So it's confirmed. He's making his move. He's testing the board," Sasuke corrected. "And I've found something. Another piece he might want to move." He produced a small, worn scroll from within his cloak. Orochimaru's network had old whispers of a splinter group of Uzumaki who fled not east towards the shinobi lands, but west, into the mountains of the Land of Iron. They abandoned ninjutsu entirely. They hid their chakra, picked up the sword, and integrated. They survived by becoming samurai. Naruto took the scroll. It felt cold to the touch. "Samurai. How many?" "It's the largest known enclave," Sasuke said. "Potentially hundreds. They are saw it to be led by a man who traces his lineage directly back to the Uzumaki clan elders who opposed the alliance with Konoha. They are proud, insular, and they trust in the honesty of forged steel far more than the tricks of shinobi." He paused, his single eye fixing on Naruto with a piercing intensity. "They will not answer a summons from a shinobi, even one who shares their blood. To them, you resent the world that let their home burn. So they're an asset we can't reach," Naruto said, the frustration evident in his voice. "They're a liability if our enemy reaches them first," Sasuke countered. "Imagine their strength, their numbers, turned against us by a god who whispers promises of reclaiming their lost glory. The unspoken threat hung heavy in the air. You have to go to them. Not as the Hokage's hero, but as a kinsman. You have to convince them that the future is worth fighting for, not the past. Sasuke turned to leave, his cloak swirling around him. Sasuke, wait, Naruto called out. This agent of his, the one in the village that Kosuke is afraid of, Mager. I'm watching him, Sasuke said, his form already beginning to merge with the shadows of the cliff face. Deal with the iron, I'll deal with the serpent. And then he was gone. The journey to the land of iron was an ascent into a different world. The lush, vibrant greens of the coast gave way to rugged foothills, then to dense, dark pine forests. And finally to the stark, unforgiving beauty of the snow-capped mountains. The air grew thin and bitingly cold. Their small delegation, Naruto, Hinata, Hana the ex-bodyguard, and Kosuke's eldest son, a stoic young man named Kenji, were bundled in heavy winter cloaks. The warmth of their companionship was a stark contrast to the frozen landscape. On their second night, huddled around a crackling campfire under a sky littered with stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch, Naruto and Hinata sat slightly apart from the others. Are you worried? She asked, her voice a soft cloud of mist in the frigid air. About meeting a bunch of stubborn, shinobi-hating samurai who are probably my distant cousins. Naruto grinned, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. Nah, sounds like a vacation. He grew serious, poking the fire with a stick. I'm worried about what happens if I fail. Sasuke's right. If Ishikari gets to them first, they could become a new army for him. Another group of pawns like Gansaki's men, but this time, they'll be our own people. Hinata gently placed her gloved hand on his arm. You won't fail, she said with unshakable certainty. They trust in steel, Sasuke-san said. Then show them the steel in your will. You have never fought for power or glory, Naruto-kun. You fight to protect. They will see that. The language of the heart is the same, whether it is spoken with a sword or a jutsu. Her faith was a shield. He leaned into her touch, drawing strength from it. I hope you're right. They found the samurai fortress, known as Tetsugakure, the Fortress of Iron. Nestled on a high plateau, a formidable structure of black stone and iron that seemed to have been carved from the mountain itself. Its walls were stark and unadorned. Its gates wrought from massive sheets of black steel. The samurai who met them were just as imposing. Clad in functional, unornamented armor, their faces were impassive, their eyes holding the cold glint of their favored metal. Many, Naruto noted, wore their hair in a traditional topknot, and the hair that escaped their helms was a familiar, striking crimson. They were led into a vast, Spartan dojo. The air smelled of polished wood, whetstone, and pine incense. Seated on a raised platform at the far end of the room was a man who could only be their leader. He was older, his weathered face a roadmap of 100 battles. But his posture was ramrod straight. A thick, crimson topknot was bound with a simple iron ring. His hands rested on the hilt of a katana that lay across his lap. His presence was one of absolute, grounded authority. I am Tetsu, the man said, his voice a low, gravelly baritone. And you are the shinobi who claims our blood. It was not a question. You wear the spiral of a clan you never knew, a village you never saw. You come as an envoy of the same shinobi world that betrayed our ancestors and stood idle as Uzushio burned. Why should we not cut you down where you stand? Because our home is burning again, Naruto said, his voice echoing in the silent hall. He met the samurai's hard gaze without flinching. Or it will be, there is a new enemy, one who sees all of us, shinobi and samurai, as nothing more than insects. I did not come here to dredge up old grievances. I came because our blood is being hunted, and we are stronger together than we are scattered and broken. Tetsu's eyes narrowed. Words. The words of shinobi are like wind. They shift and change, promising shelter one moment and delivering a storm the next. We Uzumaki of the Iron learned a different truth. We trust in what we can hold. In the weight of a life. In the edge of a blade. He stood up, his movements fluid and powerful. He drew the katana from its sheath. The steel was flawless, its edge humming with a faint light in the dim hall. If you wish for my people to listen to your words, you must first prove their weight. With this, he pointed the tip of the blade at Naruto. Kenjutsu. No tricks. No monstrous chakra. Just you, me, and the honesty of steel. Show me the will of the man who would call himself our leader." A murmur went through the assembled samurai. Hinata tensed, but Naruto gave her a subtle, reassuring glance. This was what he had expected. "A test. I accept," Naruto said. He was handed a simple, unadorned katana. The weight felt familiar, but foreign. He was competent with a blade, as all high-level shinobi were, but he was no master. Tetsu, he could tell, had been born with a sword in his hand. They faced each other in the center of the dojo. The silence was absolute. The duel began. Tetsu was a force of nature, a landslide of precise, powerful strikes. His style was economical, with no wasted movement, each swing a perfect arc of deadly intent. The clang of steel on steel was the only sound. Naruto was immediately on the defensive, his shinobi agility and reflexes the only things keeping him from being overwhelmed. He wasn't trying to match Tetsu's mastery. He was learning, adapting, surviving. He parried, dodged, and flowed around the samurai's relentless assault, his movements more like a leaf in a gale than a rock in a stream. "You fight like a cornered animal," Tetsu grunted, his blade forcing Naruto back. "All instinct and desperation. Where is your conviction?" "My conviction is in what I'm protecting." Naruto shot back, blocking a heavy overhead slash that sent tremors up his arms. He could feel Kurama's power bubbling just under the surface, offering strength, offering a shortcut. He suppressed it with an iron will. This had to be his own strength. But he did allow a sliver of the fox's chakra to flow through him, not for an attack, but for stamina, for resilience. To mend the micro-tears in his muscles, to sharpen his senses to a razor's edge. The fight wore on. 10 minutes became 20. Sweat beaded on Naruto's brow, but he did not tire. His movements became more certain, his parries stronger. He was no longer just surviving. He was contending. He saw an opening, a flicker of an imbalance as Tetsu committed to a powerful thrust. In that split second, Naruto's shinobi training took over. He dropped his sword, letting it clatter to the floor, and in the same motion, drew a kunai from his pouch. He sidestepped the thrust, the tip of Tetsu's katana hissing past his ear, and pressed the point of the kunai against the side of the samurai's neck. Stalemate. The entire hall held its breath. Tetsu froze, his eyes wide with surprise. He could have completed his thrust, but Naruto's kunai was already at his throat. "You dropped your blade," Tetsu said, his voice a low rumble. "You abandoned the duel's terms." "I abandoned a tool that was no longer useful to win the fight," Naruto countered, his breath coming in ragged bursts. His eyes were clear, holding no malice, only resolution. "That is the shinobi way." "But," he slowly withdrew the kunai and stepped back, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "I didn't come here to win a fight." Quote. Tetsu stood there for a long moment, his chest rising and falling. He slowly sheathed his katana, the sound unnaturally loud in the silent dojo. "You had a killing blow," he stated. "Why did you hold back?" Naruto finally allowed himself a small, weary smile. "Because I didn't come here to defeat you, Tetsu-san. I came to ask you to join me. To ask you to help me build a future for our children." He looked around at the stunned faces of the samurai. A sword can protect a life, but it can't build one. A home needs more than just warriors. It needs farmers, blacksmiths, and families. It needs a heart. That is what I am offering. Not a battlefield, but a home. His words, simple and honest, delivered after a display of incredible will and unexpected mercy, landed with more force than any sword strike. Tetsu looked at the young man before him, bruised, sweating, but with a fire in his eyes that spoke not of ambition, but of a fierce, protective love for his people. In that moment, he saw not a shinobi trickster, but the ghost of the Uzumaki spirit he had only ever heard of in stories. "Perhaps," Tetsu said slowly, a reluctant respect dawning in his eyes. "We will listen to your words after all." While Naruto was fighting for his clan's future with steel and will, Sasuke was hunting a serpent with shadow and stealth. He had tracked Mager's movements since the Iwa attack. The scholar was clever, his cover perfect. He was a model citizen, helpful and charismatic. But Sasuke's Sharingan saw the minute, almost imperceptible flaws in his chakra network, the faint alien taint that lay beneath the surface. He watched Mager subtly dispatch a messenger, a young Uzumaki boy completely enthralled by the scholar's charisma. Sasuke intercepted the boy easily, using a gentle genjutsu to put him to sleep and relieve him of the message scroll. The scroll was coded, but the intent was clear. It detailed Naruto's journey to the land of Iron and painted him as a Konoha puppet coming to subjugate the samurai and steal their secrets. Sabotage. Sasuke waited in the deep woods on the outskirts of the village. An hour later, Magar appeared, moving with a silent, unnatural grace. He was clearly coming to meet a contact to confirm the message was on its way. "You were always the cautious one, Uchiha Sasuke," Magar said, his pleasant, scholarly voice now holding a chilling, condescending tone. He didn't seem surprised. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "The message won't be reaching the land of iron," Sasuke said, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. Magar smiled. "A minor setback. The seeds of dissent are already sown. Naruto's soft-hearted vision will eventually collapse under its own weight. We merely have to be patient." "Who are you?" Sasuke asked, his Sharingan spinning to life. "A humble servant," Magar replied, his smile widening. "A caretaker, preparing the garden for the master's arrival." He took a step forward. "You cannot comprehend what is coming. Lord Ishikari is not a conqueror. He is a purist. He sees your squabbling, your pathetic wars over mud and trees, and he grieves for the wasted divinity you carry in your veins. He offers salvation, a cleansing of the bloodline." Sasuke drew his sword in a blur. "Chidori." A bolt of lightning cackled in his hand as he shot forward, aiming to incapacitate, to capture. Magar did not move. He did not dodge or block. The Chidori struck him square in the chest, and passed right through him. There was no blood, no wound. Magar's form flickered like a heat haze, completely intangible. It was not a genjutsu, not a substitution jutsu. It was something else entirely. "Your mortal jutsu are quaint," Magar said, his form solidifying again, completely unharmed. A strange, star-like sigil flashed for an instant in the depths of his eyes. "You fight with borrowed power. We are power." With a speed that even Sasuke's Sharingan could barely track, Magar lunged forward, his hand outstretched. He was not aiming to strike, but to touch. Sasuke teleported with his Rinnegan, reappearing a dozen yards away, a cold sweat on his brow. He had felt the horrifying void in that touch. The same life-draining emptiness from the shrine. Magar chuckled. "A wise decision. But this has been an illuminating encounter." He began to dissolve, not into smoke or leaves, but into countless motes of dark, shimmering light. "Tell your friend his dream of a sanctuary is a fool's errand. He is not building a fortress. He is building a pantry." The motes of light vanished, leaving only the oppressive silence of the forest. Sasuke stood there, his sword humming with useless lightning. He had confronted the enemy's agent and learned a terrifying truth. They were not just powerful. They obeyed different rules. They were not of this world. High on the mountain plateau, under the pale winter moon, the celebration was a muted, formal affair. Tetsu had pledged his clan's allegiance. They would send a contingent of their finest warriors, not to be shinobi, but to act as a new samurai guard for New Uzushio, a core of disciplined steel to supplement the village's growing power. The alliance was forged. Naruto and Hinata stood on a high balcony, looking out over the sea of snow-covered peaks. The world was quiet, clean, and still. He had done it. He had brought another lost branch of his family back into the fold. He turned to her, the moonlight catching the silver in her dark hair. He saw in her eyes the same unwavering faith that had been his anchor through every storm. He had built a village. He had won a battle. He had forged an alliance. But none of it felt as real, as vital, as the woman standing before him. "Hinata," he said, his voice quiet and serious. He took her hands in his. They were warm despite the cold. "When I was a kid, all I ever wanted was for people to see me. To acknowledge me. You were the first one who did. You always saw me." He looked down at their joined hands. "All this, the village, the clan, it's bigger than I ever imagined. And the threat we're facing, it's terrifying. There's a part of me that's still just a scared kid, in way over his head." He looked up, his blue eyes holding a vulnerable sincerity she had never seen before. "But when I'm with you, none of that matters. The fear, the pressure, it all just falls away. You're the calm in the middle of my storm. You're my home." He took a shaky breath. "I want to build this life, this future, with you." Not just as my advisor or my friend. I want you as my wife. Hinata Hyuga, will you marry me? Tears welled in her eyes, freezing instantly on her lashes. Her answer was not a word, but a radiant, cheerful smile as she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in the warmth of his cloak. Yes, she whispered into the thick fabric. Of course, yes. He held her tight, a feeling of profound, unshakable peace settling over him for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. He had found his strength in the iron of the samurai, but he had found his future here, in the salt of her happy tears. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Serpent in the Garden. The arrival of the Uzumaki samurai was a sight that stirred the soul of the village. They marched through the newly erected gates not as conquerors or guests, but as kinsmen returning from a long and bitter exile. 30 warriors, clad in stark black and crimson armor, their movements a study in disciplined grace. Their leader, Tetsu, walked at Naruto's side, his hand resting on the hilt of his katana. His gaze sweeping over the bustling village with a critical but not unkind eye. He saw the laughing children, the sturdy longhouses, the fishing boats bobbing in the harbor, and a fl. Ichor of something long dormant. Pride warmed his stoic features. The two branches of the sundered clan met in the central plaza. The villagers, with their vibrant colors and boisterous energy, and the samurai, with their disciplined silence and monochrome armor. It was a clash of cultures, a meeting of two different answers to the same question of survival. For a moment, they simply stared at each other across the packed earth. Then Kosuke, the elder of the Ashina, stepped forward and gave Tetsu a deep, formal bow. Tetsu returned it, his own movements precise. The dam of a century of separation broke, and a cautious but heartfelt welcome erupted. That evening, the celebration was grander than any before. It was a feast to celebrate not just the new alliance, but the engagement of their leader. Naruto and Hinata's relationship, now public, was the ultimate embodiment of his philosophy. It was an alliance of choice, a bond forged between two powerful clans not by decree, but by genuine affection. Hinata, standing beside him, accepted the well wishes of the villagers with a grace that seemed to calm the very air around her. She was not just his partner, she was becoming a pillar of the community in her own right. Her quiet strength a perfect counterbalance to Naruto's fiery charisma. Naruto's leadership had never been more secure. He had repelled an invasion, secured his people's place among the great nations, and now he had healed a schism within their own fractured lineage. He had built a home, and its foundations seemed, for the first time, to be made of solid rock. But a serpent, no matter how beautiful the garden, will always seek the rot in the roots. Mager, the charismatic scholar, moved through the festivities with a practiced ease. To most, he was a pillar of the community, a voice of reason who respected tradition while supporting their new lord. He offered congratulations to Naruto, praised the strength of the samurai, and debated points of Fuinjutsu theory with Karen. But to the few whose hearts he had cultivated, his words were different. He sat with Fumi and two other traditionalist elders in a quiet alcove, watching the samurai share stories with the fishermen. A noble sight, Mager said, his voice a smooth, melancholic murmur. But look closely. Their chakra is thin. Generations of living by the sword have weakened the gift. They are Uzumaki in name, but their blood runs pale. They are warriors, Fumi countered, though her voice lacked conviction. They will make our home safer. Safer. Mager gave a soft, sad chuckle. Or more visible. We were attacked because of Lord Naruto's fame. Now he brings in more outsiders, the Hyuga, these samurai, turning our sanctuary into a fortress. Fortresses invite sieges, Elder Fumi. Sanctuaries are meant to be hidden. He sighed, taking a sip of his tea. He is a good man. A great man. But his heart was forged in Konoha. He sees strength in alliances, in mixing, in dilution. He doesn't see that what we have is pure. And purity is the only true shield against the coming darkness. His words were insidious, twisting every one of Naruto's triumphs into a harbinger of doom. He didn't preach rebellion. He cultivated doubt. He preyed on the deep-seated fear that had kept their ancestors hiding for a century, the fear that to be seen was to be destroyed. The challenge came 2 weeks later. Naruto had called a village-wide assembly in the main plaza to formally outline the new integrated defense plan, a strategy that would blend the shinobi guard's versatility with the samurai's disciplined lines. It was meant to be a moment of unity, a demonstration of their new, combined strength. After Naruto finished his speech, his voice still ringing with optimism and confidence, Mager stepped forward from the crowd. He held up a hand, not in protest, but as if asking a simple question. "Lord Naruto," he began, his voice respectful and clear, carrying across the silent plaza. "Your words are inspiring, your vision is a powerful one. But I must ask, a vision for whom?" Naruto frowned slightly. "For all of us, Mager. For the Uzumaki clan." "But what is the Uzumaki clan?" Mager countered, turning to address the crowd. His voice was laced with a scholar's earnest curiosity, but it held a sharp, dangerous edge. "Is it a collection of people who happen to share a distant ancestor? Or is it a sacred bloodline? A divine inheritance that we have a duty to preserve?" He began to walk through the crowd, his gaze meeting those of the villagers. "Our ancestors spilled their life's blood to protect that inheritance. The Ashina clan hid in the mountains, forgetting their own name to keep their blood pure. My own family lived as slaves in the Earth country for generations, all to shield the spark of our lineage from the world." He stopped, his expression one of profound sorrow. "And now that we are finally gathered, what is our first act? We dilute it." He gestured to the Hyuga consulate. "We invite outsiders to live among us." He gestured to Tetsu and his samurai. "We celebrate warriors who have all but forgotten the feel of chakra." He gestured to Naruto and Hinata, who stood together on the speaker's platform. "Our own leader, the vessel of our clan's future, chooses a partner from another bloodline." A shocked murmur rippled through the crowd. Hinata flinched as if struck, and Naruto's hand instinctively went to her arm, a silent gesture of support. His eyes narrowed, the temperature in the plaza dropping by several degrees. "This is not a criticism of you, my lord," Mager said quickly, bowing his head in a show of fealty. "It is a question of philosophy. A question of survival. You believe our strength lies in reaching out. I ask, did that save Uzushio the first time? Our alliance with Konoha?" They stood by and watched it burn. The accusation landed like a physical blow, striking the oldest, deepest wound in their collective memory. The crowd grew restless. The seeds of doubt Mager had planted now sprouting into open fear. "You offer us a future of love and acceptance," Mager's voice rose, becoming a passionate sermon. "And it is a beautiful dream. But, dreams do not stop assassins in the night. Dreams do not stand against gods." He spread his arms wide. "Our blood is not a mere gift. It is a divine responsibility. It must be kept pure, honed, strengthened, not blended away into nothingness. We are a chosen people, and we have a duty to that choice." He had captured the crowd's fear, their pride, their history of persecution, and woven it into a compelling, terrifying argument. Purity against dilution, survival against love, the old ways against the new. Naruto stood silent on the platform, letting the wave of fear and doubt wash over his people. He could feel their turmoil, their uncertainty. When he finally spoke, his voice was not angry. It was quiet, steady, and filled with a profound, aching sadness. "You speak of purity, Mager," he began, his gaze sweeping over the crowd, meeting the eyes of the children, the elders, the shinobi, the samurai. "Let me tell you what purity gets you. It gets you a lonely apartment, eating instant ramen by yourself for dinner every night. It gets you a swing set where no one will play with you. It gets you a world of people who stare at you, whisper about you, and hate you for the divine gift you carry inside you." He took a step forward, his own story pouring from him, raw and unvarnished. "I am the purest Uzumaki here. My father was the fourth Hokage, my mother was the previous host of the Nine Tails. And I spent the first 12 years of my life utterly, completely alone. Was that strength? Was that a legacy worth preserving?" He looked at the Ashina clan members. "You hid in the mountains to keep your blood pure. And in doing so, you had to forget your own name. You lived in constant fear. Was that strength?" He looked at Tetsu. "Your ancestors chose the purity of the sword over the tricks of the shinobi. And for that pride, you were cut off from your kinsmen for 100 years. Was that strength?" The crowd was silent now, caught in the grip of his words. "This village," Naruto said, his voice softening, "was not founded to preserve a bloodline. It was founded to heal a family. A broken, scattered, lonely family. Our strength is not in our isolation. It never was. Our first home fell because we stood alone on our island, thinking our whirlpools and our pure blood would protect us. We fell because we didn't have enough friends. He walked to the edge of the platform, his gaze finding Magar in the crowd. You talk about my choices. I chose to love a woman from another clan. And her, outsiders, eyes saw a threat to our village and stood with us during the Iowa invasion. I chose to ally with our samurai cousins. And their diluted blood now stands ready to defend our walls. You call it dilution. I call it strength. You see a mixing of blood. I see a joining of hearts. You see a fortress inviting a siege. I see a home worth fighting for. He turned back to his people, his arms spread wide, his voice ringing with the absolute conviction that had ended a war. So yes, Magar, you are right. This is a question of philosophy. Do we want to be a clan that hides in the shadows, obsessed with a purity that only brings loneliness and fear? Or do we want to be a family that stands in the sun? Our arms open, our strength found not in who we exclude, but in who we welcome. A child in the front row started to clap. Then another. Soon, the entire plaza was filled with a thunderous applause. A wave of renewed faith and love that crashed against Magar, leaving him isolated in a sea of unity. As the applause roared, Karen, who had been standing on an ERB rooftop with her eyes closed in concentration, suddenly stiffened. Naruto, she projected into his mind. His chakra, it's a lie. A shell, a genjutsu of the highest order woven into his very cells. There's something inside him, something cold and dead and wrong. At the same moment, Sasuke's voice, a dry whisper, echoed in Naruto's memory, I'll deal with the serpent. Naruto's eyes hardened. The debate was over. You speak of your family in the land of Earth, Naruto said, his voice cutting through the applause and silencing it. But there is no record of any Uzumaki enclave there. Our intelligence, and the eyes of our guardian in the shadows, have confirmed it. You are not one of us. You never were. Magar's pleasant, scholarly mask finally crumbled. His face contorted, not in anger, but in a look of cold, reptilian annoyance, like a man whose experiment had been unexpectedly interrupted. So, the rat in the shadows has been whispering to you, he hissed. No matter. The lesson had to be taught. Who are you? Tetsu demanded, his hand already on his katana. Magar smiled, a truly terrifying sight. It was a smile of utter, divine contempt. I am a humble gardener, he said, sent to prune the weeds. He raised a hand, and the world seemed to warp around him. The air grew heavy, gravity itself seeming to bend. Several of Tetsu's samurai, elite warriors, charged forward, their blades drawn. They were halfway to him when they simply stopped, frozen in mid-stride, before collapsing to the ground, gasping for air, their armor groaning under an invisible, crushing weight. Your steel is meaningless, Magar said, his voice now a layered, discordant echo. His body began to glow with a sickly, pale light. Your jutsu are parlor tricks. He looked at Naruto, and for a second, the star-like sigil of the Otsutsuki flared in his eyes. Your very existence is a flaw in the grand design. Naruto was already moving, appearing in front of Magar in a flash of yellow, a Rasengan roaring in his hand. But Magar didn't even try to dodge. He simply held up his open palm. The Rasengan slammed into it and vanished. It didn't explode. It didn't dissipate. It was absorbed, consumed without a trace. Naruto leapt back, his mind reeling. Magar, or the thing that was Magar, chuckled. A fraction of Ishikari's power, a mere echo channeled through this vessel, was enough to completely nullify the attack of the world's strongest shinobi. It was a terrifying, humbling display. This vessel has served its purpose, the entity said, its body beginning to crack and flake away, turning to gray dust. The lesson is complete. You have seen the futility of your struggle. The dust swirled, and the voice delivered its final, chilling message, a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. A voice that Naruto recognized from Kosuke's nightmares. You gather the lost and the broken. You celebrate the joining of the wheat. Excellent. A wise farmer fattens his flock before the slaughter. The dust that was once Magar collapsed, leaving only a pile of gray ash on the ground. The shepherd is coming to tend to his flock. And the harvest will be divine. Silence. The plaza was utterly, deathly still. The villagers stared at the pile of ash, their faces pale with a terror far deeper than any fear of invasion. They had just faced not a man, not an army, but an idea. A power that defied all logic. They had just been looked upon by God, and been found wanting. Naruto stood over the ashes, his fists clenched so tight his knuckles were white. He had won the hearts of his people, only to show them that their hearts were a liability. He had built them a sanctuary, only to learn that it was, and always had been, a cage, waiting for the keeper to arrive. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The shepherd's arrival. The silence in the plaza was a living thing, a heavy, suffocating blanket that smothered the dying embers of the festival fires. The pile of gray ash that had been Magar was a stark, obscene monument in the center of their home. It was not the remnant of a defeated enemy, but the shed skin of a predator, a calling card left by a monster. The shepherd was coming. Naruto's mind was a maelstrom. Every instinct screamed at him, honed by years of warfare and sensing the unnatural. This wasn't the build-up to a battle. This was the stillness before a tidal wave, the hush before the sky cracks open. Karen, he barked, the command shattering the terrified paralysis that gripped the crowd. Get a sensory sweep of the entire island and the surrounding sea. Maximum range. On it, she bit out. Her face pale, her eyes already closed in concentration. Tetsu-san. Naruto turned to the samurai leader, who stood with his hand on his katana, his face a mask of granite. Your men are the disciplined corps. Form a defensive perimeter around the main hall. Protect the civilians at all costs. Tetsu nodded once, a sharp, efficient movement. Samurai. To me. Form the iron wall. His voice was a clap of thunder, and his warriors moved with a single, fluid purpose, their black and crimson armor a stark line of defense against the unknown. Hinata. Naruto's voice softened for a fraction of a second as he looked at her. Get everyone else. The children, the elders, everyone who can't fight, into the shelters beneath the main hall. Now, go. She met his gaze, her Byakugan already active, the veins around her eyes stark. In her look was not fear, but a deep, unshakable trust. We will be ready, she said, before turning to organize the panicked but orderly evacuation. The sky, which had been a clear, star-dusted canopy moments before, began to change. A single, dark cloud, the color of a fresh bruise, materialized directly over the island, swirling in a slow, unnatural vortex. It spread with terrifying speed, swallowing the stars, plunging the village into a premature, inky night. The wind began to howl, a low, mournful sound that seemed to carry whispers from a cold, empty place. Naruto. I feel it. Karen's voice was strained, laced with a panic he had never heard from her before. It's not chakra. Not like anything I've ever felt. It's a void, a hole in the world. And it's coming from above. Everyone looked up. The sea, the famously turbulent sea of the land of whirlpools, was going mad. The massive, churning maelstroms that had protected their island for centuries were slowing, their powerful spin disrupted. Then, with a sound like the world groaning in its sleep, they began to spin in the opposite direction. Waves the size of small hills crashed against the newly built sea walls, the spray hissing as it hit the shore. A tear appeared in the center of the swirling cloud vortex. It was not a rip in the clouds, but a tear in the fabric of the sky itself. It bled a pale, violet light, and from it, a figure began to descend. He did not fall. He drifted, his descent as serene and unhurried as a falling leaf. He was tall and impossibly regal, his robes the color of fresh snow, embroidered with patterns that seemed to shift and writhe like celestial constellations. His skin was alabaster, flawless and pale like polished bone. Two short, sharp horns protruded from his forehead, and his hair was the color of moonlight. His eyes, when he finally looked down upon them, held no malice, no anger, no emotion at all. They were the eyes of a farmer gazing upon his field, of a god looking down upon a flawed and transient creation. They were the color of distant, dying stars. This was Ishikari Otsutsuki. He came to a stop 100 feet above the central plaza, hovering in the air as if it were solid ground. The wind and the raging sea were his heralds, the unnatural storm his cloak. He simply watched them for a long, silent moment. his presence a crushing weight that made the very air difficult to breathe. "My precious, scattered flock," he said, his voice echoing not through the air, but directly inside their minds. It was a beautiful voice, calm and melodic, yet it was the most terrifying sound any of them had ever heard. "You have, against all odds, gathered yourselves. I must commend your shepherd. He has made the harvest so much more efficient." Quote. Naruto leapt to the roof of the main hall, standing alone against the impossible being in the sky. "We are not your flock," he called out, his voice raw with defiance. "This is not your garden. And we will not be harvested." Ishikari's lips curved into a faint, pitying smile. The defiance of a blade of grass that believes itself a tree. "It is charming." He tilted his head, his gaze sweeping over the Uzumaki below. "You do not understand. I am not your enemy. I am your salvation. The divine spark within your blood, a fragment of the god tree's own life force. Gifted to your ancestor, is a treasure. You have spent generations squandering it, diluting it with the mud of this world, weakening it with base emotions." He raised a hand, and the storm intensified. "I have come to correct this flaw. To purify you. I will scour the weakness from your bloodline, absorb your essence, and carry your legacy back to the divine realm where it belongs. I am offering you ascension. A chance for your strength to become part of something eternal." He looked directly at Naruto. "Surrender to me. Allow me to reclaim the gift. And your deaths will be painless. You will become a part of a god. It is a far greater destiny than any you could build for yourselves on this miserable rock." His offer, his entire philosophy, was so profoundly alien, so utterly dismal. Ssive of everything they held dear, their lives, their love, their very individuality, that it was beyond insult. It was a negation of their existence. Tetsu drew his katana, the sound of steel singing through the air a sharp, clear note of defiance against the howling wind. "We are Uzumaki of the iron," he roared, his voice a challenge to the heavens. "Our destiny is our own." Naruto raised his hand, a Rasengan forming in his palm, swirling with furious, concentrated power. "This is our home," he yelled, "and no one is taking it from us." Around the village, the shinobi guards and the able-bodied villagers took their stances. Seals were formed, jutsu were prepared. The entire village, 100 hearts beating as one, gave their answer to the god in their sky. A volley of fireballs, wind scythes, and spears of hardened water shot upwards, a coordinated assault from the ground. It was a testament to their training, a desperate, defiant roar of power. Ishikari watched the attack approach with a look of mild boredom. He simply raised his open palm. The jutsu did not hit a barrier. They did not explode. They simply stopped. The roaring fireballs shrank into tiny embers and were drawn into his hand. The wind scythes unraveled into gentle breezes. The water spears turned to harmless mist. He absorbed it all, every drop of their chakra, without effort, without even a flicker of acknowledgement. "Quaint," his voice echoed in their minds again. "You offer a candle's flame to the sun." With a flick of his wrist, the storm answered his will. A bolt of black lightning, thick as a tree trunk, slammed down into the plaza, shattering the stone and sending a shockwave that threw dozens of people from their feet. Rain began to fall, thick, heavy drops that struck the ground with the force of pebbles. Then, the rain turned to ice, a hailstorm of razor-sharp shards that forced even Tetsu's samurai to raise their shields. "You cannot fight me with the world's own power," Ishikari stated. His tone that of a teacher explaining a simple concept to a slow child. "I am merely borrowing what is mine." He descended slowly, landing in the center of the plaza, his feet making no sound on the cracked stone. He moved with a grace that was both beautiful and terrifying. The Uzumaki guards and samurai charged, a wave of desperate courage. They never reached him. With a simple, dismissive gesture, the very earth they stood on turned against them. The ground beneath the charging warriors turned to thick, grasping mud, trapping them. Stone walls erupted from the plaza floor, separating squads, breaking their charge, turning their coordinated attack into a confused melee. He wasn't even fighting them. He was simply editing the battlefield to his will. Naruto, powered by Sage Mode and a cloak of Kurama's chakra, was the only one who could close the distance. He burst through a stone wall, appearing before Ishikari in a flash of gold. He threw a punch, a blow that could level a mountain. Ishikari met it with 2 fingers. The impact created a crater beneath their feet, but Ishikari did not move a single inch. He held Naruto's fist, his expression unchanged. This power, he mused, a flicker of genuine academic interest in his eyes. The beast of 9 tails. A fragment of the 10 tails, scattered by the sage. Another piece of divine energy, wasted on a mortal vessel. Naruto roared, trying to pull his fist back. But it was held fast. He felt the chakra being siphoned from him, drawn out through the point of contact, feeding the Otsutsuki's bottomless reserves. Fascinating, Ishikari whispered, his starry eyes seeming to pierce through Naruto, through Kurama, seeing the very source of his power. Such defiance, such a fierce will to protect such insignificance. It was not a sneer. It was a genuine observation. Ishikari looked at the samurai forming a shield wall to protect a group of children, at Karen directing healers to the wounded, at Hinata coordinating the final retreat to the shelters. And he saw not courage, but a flawed, illogical sentimentality. A weakness in the bloodline. I see now, Ishikari said, his voice holding a sliver of new understanding. Strength is not in your individual power. It is in this bond. This collective delusion. How utterly impure. He effortlessly tossed Naruto aside, sending him tumbling through the air to crash into the far wall of the plaza. The battle was a rout. They were not fighting an enemy, they were fighting a force of nature. Every jutsu was a gift of fuel to him. Every physical attack was met with an immovable defense. The very island was his weapon to command. Naruto pushed himself out of the rubble, his body aching, his chakra cloak flickering. He looked at the faces of his people, bruised, terrified, but still fighting. Still standing between their children and the pale god who had come to erase them. He saw their spirit, the unbreakable will that he had just praised in his speech against Mager. And he realized, with a chilling certainty, that it was not enough. Their will was unbreakable, but their bodies were not. Their spirit was infinite, but their chakra was not. He could not punch this enemy into submission. He could not talk him down. He had built this village to be a sanctuary. But a sanctuary could not stand against a god who could command the storm and drink their power like water. A sanctuary was not enough. He needed a prison. His mind raced back to the forbidden fuinjutsu he had used against Ganseki, the heavenly prison. He had used it to restrain. But the theory behind it, the deeper, darker lore he had uncovered in the ruins, spoke of another application. Not to restrain, but to seal. To create a cage not of light, but of an entire dimension, powered by the life force of the Uzumaki themselves. The cost, the scroll had warned, was catastrophic. He looked at Hinata, who was now directing a fighting retreat toward the main hall, her gentle fist a blur of white and blue against the encroaching stone walls. He looked at his people, his family. The choice was no choice at all. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. Heart of the Maelstrom. The battle had devolved into a desperate struggle for survival. Ishikari was no longer simply defending, he was systematically dismantling them. With a wave of his hand, Tetsu's katana was wrenched from his grip and twisted into a useless pretzel of black steel. With a glance, the ground beneath a squad of shinobi guards turned to quicksand, swallowing them to their waists. He moved through the chaos with a detached, almost sorrowful grace. Like a gardener pruning a beautiful but diseased plant. He was not trying to kill them. He was breaking their will to fight, demonstrating the absolute futility of their defiance. Your bonds are your weakness. His voice echoed in their minds, a calm lecture amidst the storm. Your love for each other makes you predictable. You shield your young. You protect your wounded. You sacrifice yourselves for a flawed ideal. This sentimentality is the disease I have come to cure. Naruto, battered and bruised, his Kurama cloak sputtering like a dying flame, knew he was right. Every move they made was to protect someone else. And Ishikari exploited it perfectly. He was hurting them, cornering them, preparing for the final, brutal harvest. From the relative safety of the main hall's entrance, Hinata watched. Her Byakugan a curse that allowed her to see everything with excruciating clarity. She saw the flickers of chakra in her friends as they were struck down. She saw Naruto's reserves draining at an alarming rate. She saw the cold, bottomless void of power that was Ishikari. They were not losing. They were being erased. Then, a flicker of movement in the churning, black sky. A portal, a swirling distortion of space, opened and closed in an instant. And Sasuke Uchiha was there. He appeared behind Ishikari, his sword coated in the black flames of Amaterasu, a silent, lethal strike aimed at the Otsutsuki's neck. Ishikari didn't even turn. A sphere of black, gravitational force, no larger than a marble, appeared behind his head, catching Sasuke's blade. The Amaterasu flames were sucked into it, vanishing without a trace. The sword itself groaned, bending as if caught in the gravity of a star. The other one, Ishikari mused, finally turning to face Sasuke. He looked from Sasuke's Sharingan to his Rinnegan. The sage's eyes, another precious gift, wasted on a child who plays in the shadows. I've played with gods before, Sasuke snarled, teleporting away with his Negan just as the gravitational sphere imploded, leaving a vacuum that cracked the air with a sound like thunder. The two Uchiha and Uzumaki descendants stood together, a sight the world had not seen since the Valley of the End. The last best hope of their world, facing down the calm, white specter of their end. Together, Naruto grunted, wiping a trickle of blood from his lip. Sasuke replied, which was his equivalent of a rousing speech. They attacked in perfect, unspoken concert. Sasuke used his Rinnegan to swap places with rocks, with debris, with Naruto himself, creating an unpredictable, three-dimensional assault. Naruto used his massive chakra reserves to create diversions, giant Rasenshuriken, tailed beast bombs, forcing Ishikari to deal with large-scale threats while Sasuke went for precise, debilitating strikes. It was a masterclass in combat, the pinnacle of shinobi power. And it was utterly, completely useless. Ishikari was a perfect counter. He absorbed every ninjutsu. He predicted every teleportation. His control over gravity and the fundamental forces of nature made their physical attacks seem like the struggles of infants. He caught a tailed beast bomb in a space-time distortion, shrinking it down until it was a mote of harmless light in his palm. He parried Sasuke's sword strikes with a casualness that was infuriating. He was not just fighting them. He was analyzing them, a look of faint, academic curiosity on his face. The Indra and Asura transmigrants, his voice echoed. The eternal, futile conflict, now united against me. Your history is a flat circle of violence. I am here to break it. Quote, with a final, decisive movement, he clapped his hands together. A wave of force, invisible and absolute, erupted from him. It wasn't an attack, it was a statement. Naruto and Sasuke were thrown back like dolls, their combined assault shattered. They crashed into the rubble, broken and drained. The last line of defense had fallen. Ishikari turned his attention back to the main hall, where the last of the village's defenders stood, a battered but unbroken line. The experiment is over, his voice declared. The harvest begins. He began to walk towards them, and with each step, the life force of the island seemed to drain away. The grass turned brown. The last of the festival lanterns flickered and died. A deep, soul-chilling cold settled over everything. From the rubble, Naruto watched him approach. He was out of options. Out of power. Out of time. The scroll's warning echoed in his mind. The cost is catastrophic. He finally understood. It wasn't about chakra. It was about life. He pushed himself to his feet, ignoring his screaming muscles, ignoring Kurama's roars of protest from within. He had one last move. A seal. One that couldn't be absorbed, because it wasn't an attack. It was a sacrifice. Karen. He yelled, his voice a raw, desperate command. I need you. Get a link. Connect every Uzumaki on this island. Connect them to me. Karen, her arm in a makeshift sling, stared at him from the watchtower, her eyes wide with horrified understanding. She knew the theory. She knew what he was asking. Naruto, no, it will kill you. It will drain you to nothing. Just do it, he roared, a plea and a command in one. He looked at Hinata, who was standing on the steps of the main hall, her face a mask of terror. Their eyes met across the battlefield. In his gaze, she saw not despair, but a terrible, unwavering resolve. He gave her a small, sad smile. A goodbye. His choice was made. Tears streamed down Karen's face, but she did as he commanded. She bit her thumb, slammed her hand on the ground, and a wave of golden chakra erupted from her, spreading across the island like a root system of pure light. The adamantine sealing chains. But this time, they weren't being used as weapons. A single, ethereal chain shot out and connected to Naruto. Then, more chains spread out, finding every person with Uzumaki blood. They touched the foreheads of Tetsu and his samurai, of Kosuke and the Ashina elders, of the fishermen, the dyers, the guards. They felt not a drain, but a request. An invitation. Lend me your strength, your life. And to a person, they all accepted. They opened their hearts, pouring their own life force, their own fierce Uzumaki spirit, into the network, channeling it all towards the single, glowing figure in the center of the storm. Naruto roared as the power surged into him. It was an agony and an ecstasy. He felt the collected will of his entire clan, their history of suffering, their stubborn refusal to die, their desperate hope for the future. His body became a living nexus, a maelstrom of golden life energy. The Kurama cloak was burned away, replaced by a coat of pure, incandescent gold, intricate seal. Ing formulas swirling across its surface like living tattoos. He had become a human fuinjutsu. Ishikari stopped, his expression for the first time showing a flicker of genuine surprise. What is this? You are weaving your very souls together. A tapestry of defiance. How? Beautifully pointless. Naruto ignored him. The power was still not enough. It was vast, but finite. To trap a god, he needed something more. Something infinite. He looked at Hinata. His voice was a whisper, carried on the wind. Hinata, I need you to let go. She understood instantly. She was standing guard over the entrance to the shelter, the last bastion. But he wasn't asking her to fight. He was asking her to trust. And in that moment, she made her own choice. The battle could not be won with gentle fists or iron walls. It could only be won with an act of absolute, selfless love. Everyone, she cried out to the last of the defenders. Focus on me. She began to glow with a soft, indigo light, her own chakra flaring to life. But she didn't project it outwards. She poured it inwards, offering it to the man she loved. Her chakra, the gentle, precise energy of the Hyuga, flowed into Naruto. It was not the fiery, chaotic life force of the Uzumaki. It was a calm, stabilizing current. It was the yin to his yang, the quiet heart to his raging storm. Their two energies, so different, yet so perfectly complementary, mingled and merged. It was the final key, the catalyst that stabilized the volatile, overwhelming power he was trying to contain. In that moment of pure, selfless connection, the seal was perfected. It is done, Naruto whispered, his voice sounding ancient and new at the same time. He looked at Ishikari, and his eyes were no longer blue. They were swirling pools of pure golden energy. This is our answer, Otsutsuki. You call our bonds a weakness. But you are wrong. It is our ultimate strength. He slammed his hands on the ground. Forbidden sealing art. Uzumaki's soul cage, maelstrom prison. The world broke. The ground beneath Ishikari's feet did not crack. It dissolved into a swirling vortex of golden light and sealing formulas. The sky above him shattered, revealing not a starry expanse, but a chaotic, dimensionless void. Chains made not of chakra, but of the collective will of an entire clan, erupted from this void, wrapping around Ishikari's limbs. For the first time, a look of genuine alarm crossed the Otsutsuki's face. He tried to absorb the chains, but he couldn't. They were not made of chakra. They were made of life itself, of soul, of will. He tried to break them, but why were as unbreakable as a people's love for their home. Impossible, he hissed, his calm demeanor finally shattering. You would sacrifice your own life force. For what? This temporary, meaningless existence. For family. Naruto roared back, his body beginning to burn away, turning into golden particles of light that were being fed into the seal. For home. For a future. Something a sterile, empty thing like you will never understand. The vortex pulled Ishikari down, dragging him into the dimensional prison. He fought back, his power flaring, tearing at the fabric of the seal. The island shook, threatening to tear itself apart. The seal was wavering. It was costing too much. Naruto was fading too fast. From the steps of the main hall, Hinata watched, her heart breaking. She saw the seal failing. She saw Naruto sacrificing everything. And she knew what she had to do. She ran, past the defenders, across the ruined plaza, straight into the heart of the maelstrom. Hinata, No, Sasuke screamed, trying to get to his feet. But she was too fast. She didn't stop at the edge of the seal. She ran right to Naruto, to the burning, golden figure at its heart, and wrapped her arms around him, pressing her own body against his. "My home is with you," she whispered. And she poured everything she was, every drop of her chakra, every ounce of her will, every fiber of her love, directly into him. Their two chakra signatures, Uzumaki and Hyuga, intertwined, creating a new, impossibly powerful symbol, a swirling spiral with a gentle, calm eye at its center. The double helix of their combined souls. It was the final, perfect lock for the cage. The seal exploded with a final, blinding flash of golden indigo light. The vortex slammed shut, the ground became solid again, and the sky returned to normal. The storm vanished. The howling wind died. Silence. In the center of the plaza, where the vortex had been, there was now a new structure. A low, circular shrine of black, unbreakable stone that had not been there before. In its center, a single, massive seal glowed with a soft, pulsing light. Ishikari was gone, trapped, but Naruto and Hinata were gone, too. The gathered Uzumaki collapsed, the sudden severing of the chakra link draining them. Karen fell to her knees, sobbing. Tetsu stared at the shrine, his iron will finally broken by grief. Sasuke stood alone in the ruins, looking at the seal, a profound, terrible loss etched on his face. They had won. The shepherd was caged, but the cost, as the scroll had warned, was catastrophic. Their saviors, their leader, their heart, had paid it in full. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. The sun rises on the whirlpool. The silence that followed the final flash of light was more profound than any battle cry. It was a hollow, aching void where two bright souls had once been. The dawn broke over a village that was both saved and shattered, the rising sun casting long, sorrowful shadows across the ruined plaza. The survivors, bruised, grieving, and utterly exhausted, simply stood and stared at the black stone shrine that now occupied the heart of their home. It was a monument to their victory, but it felt like a tombstone. Ishikari was gone, his oppressive presence replaced by the soft, rhythmic pulse of the Great Seal. But Naruto and Hinata were gone, too, consumed by the very jutsu that had saved them. The cost had been exactly WH. At the ancient scrolls had foretold, absolute. Karen was the first to move. Her sobs subsided into ragged, determined breaths. She pushed herself to her feet, her face streaked with tears and grime. ND walked on unsteady legs to the edge of the shrine. She reached out a trembling hand, her sensory perception extending, probing the intricate web of fuinjutsu. She felt it, then. A flicker, infinitesimally small, buried deep within the seal's complex matrix, like two embers glowing in a mountain of cold ash. "They're not gone," she whispered, her voice cracking with a fragile, desperate hope. The others turned to her, their faces a mixture of disbelief and yearning. "They're in there," Karen said, her voice growing stronger, louder. Their chakra, their life force, it wasn't just consumed by the seal. It became the seal. They're the lock. They're the bars of the cage. Sasuke was beside her in an instant, his rinnegan blazing as he analyzed the fuinjutsu. He saw what she felt. The seal was not just a construct of chakra. It was a living thing, a self-sustaining prison powered by the harmonized, intertwined life forces of Naruto Uzumaki and Hinata Hyuga. They had not died. They had transformed, sacrificing their physical forms to become the eternal wardens of their enemy. A new kind of grief, sharper and more complex, washed over the village. They were alive, but they were lost, trapped in their own victory. The months that followed were a blur of grim determination. The story of the Battle of New Uzushio spread through the elemental nations, not as a heroic ballad, but as a chilling ghost story. Delegations from the other great villages arrived, not with congratulations, but with awe and terror. The cage stood before the silent black shrine, humbled by the scale of the power and the depth of the sacrifice. New Uzushio was no longer just a resurgent clan's home, it was the world's first and last line of defense against the celestial horrors they now knew existed. Konoha sent its best and brightest. Sakura Haruno, now the world's leading medical nin, worked tirelessly with Karen, trying to understand the nature of the living seal. Shikamaru Nara, his face permanent L. Etched with a weary sorrow for his lost friend, became the acting political liaison, helping the Uzumaki clan navigate the treacherous new political landscape. The village itself did not crumble in its grief. It endured. Fueled by the memory of what their leaders had given for them, they rebuilt with a fierce, quiet purpose. Tetsu and his samurai became the unshakable pillars of the community's defense. Kosuke and the elders became the keepers of their history. Karen, thrust into a leadership role she never wanted, became the acting clan head, her sharp intellect and fierce loyalty guiding them through the darkness. They were a family forged in fire, and they would not let their patriarch's sacrifice be in vain. Sasuke did not stay. His path was a lonely one. He gave Karen all the information he had gathered on the Otsutsuki. Every scrap of lore, every half-forgotten legend. There are more of them, he said, his voice a low, grim promise before he departed. Ishikari was not the first, and he won't be the last. I will find the answers. I will be the world's shadow. And he vanished, once more the unseen guardian, hunting a threat that most of the world still didn't even know existed. Spring arrived, 6 months after the battle. The scars on the landscape were beginning to heal, covered over by a blanket of vibrant green. The village was whole again, stronger and more united than ever. But the shrine in the center of the plaza remained a place of quiet, constant mourning. It was on the anniversary of Naruto and Hinata's engagement that the first miracle occurred. Karen was meditating before the shrine, as she did every day, monitoring the seal, when she felt a change. A pulse, not from the seal itself, but from within it. A new rhythm, a tiny, third heartbeat joining the steady, harmonized rhythm of the other two. Sakura, get over here now, she screamed. Sakura worked with a frantic, desperate energy. Using her perfect chakra control, she channeled her medical ninjutsu into the surface of the seal. Not to break it, but to diagnose it. The feedback she received was impossible, illogical, miraculous. Hinata. She was pregnant, Sakura whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. When she ran into the seal, she was already pregnant. The news sent a shockwave of hope through the entire village. A child, a legacy, a future. The seal had not just taken them, it had preserved them. And inside that impossible prison, a new life was growing, nurtured by the combined life force of its parents and the very fabric of the Fuinjutsu. Their grief was transformed into a new kind of vigil. The entire village now focused its hope on the silent black stone. The seal was no longer a tomb, it was a cradle. They held their breath for 3 more months, waiting, praying. The second miracle happened on a bright, clear summer morning, 1 year to the day of the shepherd's arrival. The great seal on the shrine began to glow, its golden indigo light pulsing with a gentle, rhythmic intensity. The light grew, bathing the entire plaza in its warmth. Then, with a soft chime that sounded like a temple bell, a portion of the seal on the shrine's surface dissolved, and a single, perfect lotus flower made of pure white chakra bloomed from the black stone. As the petals opened, they revealed a newborn baby, sleeping peacefully in its center. He had a shock of bright, golden hair and, when he opened his eyes, they were the pale, serene lavender of the Hyuga. On each of his cheeks were 2 faint, whisker-like marks. Karen was the first to reach him, scooping him up with trembling hands. As she held him, she felt it. The seal was still absolute, Ishikari still caged. But a sliver of his parents' essence, their love and their life, had been given back to them. The seal itself had birthed him, a living embodiment of their sacrifice. A great, joyous cry went up from the assembled crowd. Tears of sorrow were replaced by tears of profound, unbelievable joy. They named him Boruto, a name that meant, bolt, but also a play on his father's name, a new beginning. Years passed. New Uzushio became a beacon of hope and strength in a changed world. The memory of Naruto and Hinata was not a sad one, but a revered legend, a story told to every child about the ultimate power of love and sacrifice. Karen, with Tetsu at her side, led the clan with wisdom and strength. And Boruto grew. He was a prodigy, a child of impossible heritage. He possessed his father's boundless energy and his mother's gentle heart. He could see chakra points with his bare eyes, a natural evolution of the Byakugan. And his own chakra was a perfect, harmonious blend of Uzumaki vitality and Hyuga precision. He was raised not by two parents, but by an entire village that loved him fiercely. He was their prince, their future, their living miracle. On his 16th birthday, Boruto stood before the shrine that was his parents' legacy and his own birthplace. He placed his hand on the Great Seal. He could feel them, a faint warmth, a whisper of love, an echo of the two souls who had given everything for him. He was not sad, he was proud. He had inherited more than just their power. He had inherited their will. The final scene is of Boruto, now a young man, standing on the same cliffs where his father had once stood. He looks out over the bustling, vibrant village, a home forged in the heart of a maelstrom. He is not just the son of the hero or the last Uzumaki, he is the patriarch of a new, thriving people. He has inherited his father's duty, not as a burden, but as an honor. His gaze drifts down to the plaza, to the silent black shrine at the heart of his home. He knows the shepherd is still there, caged and waiting. He knows other, darker things lurk in the void between the stars. The world is not safe. The fight is not over. But deep underground, in the shrine room where Ishikari is sealed, the intricate lines of the Fuinjutsu glow with a steady, unbreakable light. For years, a single, microscopic crack had been a lingering threat. But now, as if sensing the new guardian who watched over it, the crack began to mend itself, sealed by a fresh wave of golden indigo energy. The prison was not weakening. It was growing stronger. The legacy was secure. The shepherd was caged, and the sun was rising on the whirlpool, brighter than ever before. Chapter 10 End.